Hey you guys, happy
Trick or
Halloween.
treat.
Look at Thomm with his thing. He looks like a Sith Lord over there. I kind of love this jacket. You do. You look like Darth Vader after
Yeah,
they
I have to
take
take
his
the helmet
helmet
off.
off, and yeah, you look just
Yeah.
like that. And look, we
He's
even
like,
like
what's it called? He said, it's too late for me now. You already have.
excellent. So as you can see, in honor of this is just a little intro we're doing. The bulk of the show, actually, we filmed somewhere else, and we had Shauna and Eric on, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But look, we have like a little different background. This is actually my office. I put like all these Halloween decorations, which are actually just my regular decorations, because I don't, every day is Halloween. You know how that shit goes. But yeah, we decided to get a little bit dressed up for the intro and, do a little Halloween shit, because it's a special Halloween special,
You
right?
know, these are our regular clothes.
They are, yeah.
They're
Well,
just
like I
winter
said,
clothes.
we didn't need like to buy
Yeah.
costumes or anything like that. Our
Yeah.
whole our whole closets is just full of shit like this.
We ought to show them our closet. It's like stepping into a black hole. You can't even choose anything because everything's just black.
I know.
We got goth problems. And
We-
goth problems are the pants are blacker than the shirt. And you know what I mean?
Don't you
Different
hate when that
tones,
happens?
different
Yeah.
tones and shades of black.
Because there are many.
Yeah.
And really, that's the way that I recognize my clothes. It's like, yeah, they're all black, but they're all different shades of black.
Yeah.
So
we
you
have
kind
we
of
have so it's kind of an exaggeration. We do have I do have like military colors and things like that too, and you have colored T-shirts.
I have a brown shirt and
Yeah.
a red shirt,
Yeah.
and that's about it. All the rest of the stuff is black. But like I said, the main bulk of the show, like the middle portion, we just recorded us kind of, reading a bunch of stories that got sent in, and Sean and Eric were here. Then we kind of went off on some tangents. We talked about nightmares we had. We talked about various paranormal experiences we had, other scary shit that happened. I want to say, like, at the outset, we got like a really lot of good stories. There were a couple of them that I had to leave out just because they were too long. I mean, this story or this episode is ended up being like, I don't know how long it's going to be when I edit it all together, but it's like at least 2.5 3 hours long, which is fine because it's a Halloween special. But some of the stories we just kind of we started reading them and they were like, okay, well, this is just too long, we're just going to take this one out. So I really, really apologize if you sent me a story and I didn't use it, but some of them were just too long and we wanted to kind of keep the show like
One
kind
of
of
them was
moving
a
along.
short story. It's pretty good about a woman being haunted by her dead husband.
Yeah, I know. I
But
really
that
like
would have
that.
been about an hour and a half worth of read. It's just not impossible. It's not possible to put that in the show.
Yeah.
Format.
That's what I mean. It's like, so I feel really bad because I wanted to read everything. There was a couple other ones I had to leave out too just because they were really long, but that's
That story that ought to be put out in short story and put it on audiobook.
yeah, it should. Yeah, you should actually.
Might be able to sell that.
Yeah. But so, like I said at the beginning, what we're going to do here, and if you want to hear me reading like some little fragments of a couple of my fictional stories, then I'm just going to put that. I just read a couple by myself, there's just a few minutes, and that'll be like at the very end of the show. So if you want to like stay tuned for that, then that's where that will be. Other than that, let's do a couple of shout outs, and then I have one personal experience, a story that a girl named Dana sent in. And it kind of just came in right under the wire, and we didn't have time to do it while Shauna and Eric were here. So I said, okay, well, we'll just do it in the intro. And, so then her story will be covered too, because I really liked it. So let's see. What are our shout outs? Our last movie review was Lucio Fulci's The Beyond, and I was very excited that I finally got to do a Lucio Fulci movie. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Dan, who's one of our patrons, and he actually increased his support, so thank you very much for that. I also want to give a shout out to Knothead Studios, who gave us a very generous PayPal donation just the other day. So thank you very
I
much.
think they dropped like $50.
They did, yes, and
nice.
It's like we really, really appreciate that. And like I said, we try our best to make the shows enjoyable for you guys. And now we do 3 shows a week. So any help is appreciated. And like I said, if you want to go to our Patreon page or go to our PayPal.
Yeah, I think we're up to about 400.
We are, yeah.
And that's only like what, 15, 20 subs or 15,
It's
20 patrons?
I think it's 38 patrons
38
or
now?
39 patrons,
Yeah.
something like that.
Most of our patrons are heavy hitters. They're really helping us out, giving us 20. I think one of them gives us $30 a month.
They do.
Yeah, So
yeah,
that,
and someone gave us 40 a month too.
wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing. And really, like I said, anything, we appreciate anything. Even if you can't like give us any financial support, even just sharing the show or telling other people about it.
Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, anything like that. If you just share it on Twitter, share it on whatever, it's like, that really helps us a lot too.
Tell other people about it.
Yeah, so that helps a lot too if you would like to contribute in that way.
Yeah, you can plug us, try to get us as guests on your favorite show. People always ask us to be guests anyway, just some of the shows are a little small.
Yeah, but I like to do them anyways, and it's like, because you never know who might hear that, that might not have heard you
I think we've done shows that we were the only ones that saw it.
Probably.
We were on a radio show in LA one time, and I think we were the only people listening.
That was amazing.
That was amazing.
That was us, and Steve Mera was
yeah.
on the show with us too. He's a parapsychologist, which most of you will know if you listen to us regularly.
That was the worst show of all time.
And it seemed like they were very excited to get us on, and they seemed very professional. But then when the show started, there were like 3 or 4 hosts, and they sounded either drunk or really stupid frat bro type people.
They didn't even really ask us any pertinent
They
questions.
didn't ask. They just started talking about sports, and I was just kind of like, "Are we even here? Like, what the hell is going on?"
I said 2 sentences the whole time.
I think so too. It's like I don't even know if I said anything, and it's like I thought maybe they got high and they forgot we were there or something like that. It was like the weirdest.
They were under the influence of something.
Definitely. It was either stupidity or stupidity plus some other substances, but that was a very weird experience.
Like Moloko plus Symptomask and Drenchrome.
It was something like that, except not as fun as that sounds. So let's do this story that Dana sent, and this is apparently, it sounded from the way she wrote it, this sounded like a personal experience that happened to her probably about 20 years ago, and you'll appreciate this because it had kind of a gothy flair, so I thought that's kind of nice that we're putting it right here at the beginning when we're all dressed up and shit. So here we go. This is Dana's story. As I said in the main part, I don't want to use anybody's last names just in case they get mad at me. So that's what I'm doing. So here's her story. My head was hanging out of the window, nostrils and hair full of wind. My eyes were closed, relaxed, my mouth smiling. I took in the thrill of the night. Do you want a clove? My gothy, stormy friend Amanda asked, driving us forward. Yes, I do. I've known Amanda for over 20 years, but on this night, our friendship was new. I call her my stormy friend because although we've only known each other through phone calls in most recent years, at one time, when we both occupied the same physical space, we seemed to manifest very crazy, very intense storms. We've laughed about it often and joked that we haven't lived in the same place for so long because the world simply could not handle it. That cracked me up very much.
Yeah.
There, on that chilly fall night, I opened my eyes, but before accepting the gift, I looked up to take in the fullness of a misty moon. Bringing my head and my attention back into the car, I lit my cigarette with her already burning one, and we let them both fill the air with thick, fragrant smoke. We pulled into a long, swerving dirt driveway. Our destination was to hang out and walk a track located amidst a nearby playground. The middle was filled with old, rusty contraptions for kids. The dusty track surrounded the still and silent swings. Beyond that, in 3 of the 4 directions, were hills on which perched thickets of pine trees. To others, as we parked and got out of our old Camaro, dressed all in black, we must have looked like 2 dark specters approaching the dirt circle. However, there were no others. The playground was silent, except for the soft whisperings of the wind creeping across the land. The only light besides the moon was a single lamp post illuminating a small portion of the track. Nearby was a set of picnic tables where we decided to stop for yet another smoke break. We sat atop the tables talking about many things, anxious to learn each other's past experiences, our life dreams, and our favorite subject, spooky things. Before we got a chance to walk, we noticed the headlights of another car swiftly speeding down the road. A trail of dust followed behind. As it got closer, we realized it was a police car. It parked beside us, and the officer got out. He walked towards us with a calm stride, and with a kind manner explained to us that we couldn't be out there past sundown. Of course, we said it was cool and that we'd be leaving. Satisfied with our words, he wished us good night and got back into his vehicle. We watched his taillights disappear in the distance. With a small degree of disappointment, we got ourselves together and followed. However, when we got to the end of the road, we saw the entrance sign. It indicated that the playground was closed after dark, but that the track was always open. We also recalled that a relative had previously told us about the place and said they had walked there at night. Determined not to go home and using some kind of weird misguided logic that as long as we were walking the path, our presence there should be okay, we turned the car around and headed back. Again, we exited the car, but immediately approached the track. We had to avoid a not quite dried mud puddle right at the edge. Everything else had dried from the last week's rain, but this one had been too big and too deep. We stepped over it and onto the circular trail. So began our spiraling walk. The conversation continued, with each word directing our attention more and more to each other. Around us, the shadows fluttered and shifted in the depth of the trees. We took no notice. One lap around, we approached the one light looming above the track. At the same instant, we peered at the ground. Confused at first, we soon recognized in the dead center of the spotlight was an arrow drawn in the dirt. We stopped abruptly and then continued forward slowly with curiosity and caution. Our eyes followed the direction the arrow pointed. If there had been any breeze at all, it was for sure gone at that moment. It seemed as if the air itself had been sucked from the earth as we both saw hovering in the woods a small orange light. It almost reminded us of a burning cigarette. In fact, that's what we decided it was, but it remained in the same spot, the light of it fading in and out almost rhythmically. At a time when we should have been alarmed or at least suspicious, for some reason we dismissed this strangeness and continued on the circular path. Around we went again, talking, laughing, our breath getting more rapid. Turning the curves of the circle, we turned our conversation to the topic of music and started talking about The Cure. We talked about that song Boys Don't Cry. I don't remember much else, because as we approached the lamppost for a second time, the breath was taken from us both. Drawn next to the arrow were the words, "Boys Don't Cry." Nervously, we began to look around. Surely someone must be on the track listening to us, we thought, but how could we have missed them? We couldn't have. There was no place to hide. The area surrounding us and the space before the trees was empty and flat. Again, I thought there was no place for anyone to hide. With every muscle stiffening, aching with a small shock, we managed to continue on with the intention of getting to the car. Just like in dreams, our legs seemed to be going faster than our mind perceived the passage of time, but I feel like we were both trying to hold it together, trying hard not to panic. Finally, the car grew more comfortably in sight. There was a small amount of relief, but then we had to cross over that mud puddle again. Deep in the surface of the wet were dog prints that were much, much too big to be dog prints. Shock flooded our systems, and I don't know who said it, but one of us gasped, "That wasn't there before, was it?" And the other gave an abrupt no for an answer. There was no hesitation, only immediate and desperate action. We practically ran for the car, and as our feet fled, it seemed that behind them stirred up the cold wind that rapidly began to build up on itself. The atmosphere came wildly alive, and as we entered the car and shut the door, it was like we were fleeing a hurricane. Inside was a sense of false quiet and calm. Among the oncoming storm, we thought we heard a long, piercing howl. Pounding the locks on the doors down, Amanda cranked up the ignition. The wind was now swirling around us as she quickly backed up, threw the car in gear, and took off down the road. I find it interesting that as we were leaving, that police car was coming back in. We passed each other in the turbulent night. We made no attempt to stop and were quite sure he was confirming that we had left the area. That night it rained again. The storm tore on and on. It ripped through the city long after we said goodbye and headed for our own homes. I don't think either of us slept, and I recall neither of us got any kind of deep or refreshing sleep for weeks after. There were nightmares neither of us could remember, but we did recall a sense of unease, mostly at night. There was that unsettling feeling that you weren't alone. I would gaze out of my second-story window and think that I could see some shadow in the nearby woods or hear a deep growling mingled with the wind. I thought I could hear the tapping of nails walking along the pavement below. The shapes were always those of a big dog. Eventually, the anxious feelings subsided and life went on as usual. I must add that a couple days after that happened and the rain had diminished, my curiosity led me to drive back to that park in the daylight. It was a clear sunny day, crisp and beautiful, like the rain had washed all things dirty away, leaving everything spotless. There were several cop cars parked with canine unit stickers on the back of them. I saw that some officers were out on the grassy knoll playing catch and having fun with their German Shepherd comrades, and others were leading theirs up in the hills among the trees, where that light had shined, looking for something. I thought to get out of my car, walk up to an officer and ask questions, and it certainly crossed my mind, but in the end I observed for a while and then just drove away. From time to time, that night still crosses my mind. I realize I'll never know what was out in those woods. I guess I don't want to, that's why I didn't ask the question. I do wonder why we responded the way we did to certain things, like not leaving to begin with, and why we weren't more alarmed by that arrow and that light in the woods. How we shrugged it off, and when now I would have run. I think that maybe something was luring us. Our minds naturally eased by the flow of that circle, and we walked, and that little warm light that burned alternately dim and then bright. This story creeped me the fuck out.
What state did this happen again? Was it mentioned?
Oh, I don't know. I don't think she said, actually.
I bet you that was the South.
It might have been.
You know what that was, right?
What do you think it was?
That was the spirit of Orion.
What?
That's right. Well, Elvis was known in the South as being a Messiah. That was the Mississippi Messiah.
Yeah.
All right, he died.
Yeah.
And rose again as Orion. And then Orion got killed in a holdup.
He did, yeah.
At the pawn shop.
That is a true
and
story.
And now he's come back from the dead as a hound dog.
Oh.
That's what them little paw prints. Yeah, that was the ghost of Orion.
Yeah, I'm not
Spirit
sure.
of Orion.
I'm not sure what state that took place in.
That's right.
You guys should see Orion. What the hell was the name of that documentary? Orion, the Man Who Would Be King, or something like that.
Man Who Would Be King.
Yeah,
Orion.
He sounded just like Elvis, and some people thought that he was Elvis
He was
reborn.
the spiritual reincarnation.
He was like the reincarnation. Yeah, that was like a really good. But yeah,
he was possessed by the spirit of Elvis.
From time to time, he actually kind of looked like Elvis a little bit too.
They thought it might have been some kin in some way, but
I he might have been related.
I think the DNA proved that he was not related.
Yeah, did
they were from the same area.
Yeah, how did that ever come out? I don't know if I ever.
I think they got some DNA off of Elvis.
Yeah.
Off of a hairbrush that he had or something, some hair, and I think that if I remember correctly, they kind of compared it to Orion. I forgot what Orion's real name was. He went by the name Orion.
Yeah, Jimmy something?
Jimmy something or other. And he really couldn't... It's hard to say, because in that part of Mississippi, we're all kind of related.
True.
You know, if you go back far enough, we're all related. It really doesn't even matter what color you are. The white people and the black people, a lot of times, were related.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of that going on.
And it's just in that area, everybody's kind of related.
Yeah, true.
You know, but a lot of people came there after the war, and that's what matters. So whether you were... You know, before the Civil War or after the Civil War. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
After the Civil War, it's all carpetbaggers. That's fake Southerners.
So what about that story reminded you of Orion? Just the dog part?
Yeah, everything. Just everything about it.
Like it's
That's
funny
like
because
something Elvis would do.
Is it?
Yes, indeed.
I guess it kind of is.
Well, you're talking about music and boys don't cry, and Elvis was a boy and he cried and his mama cried and all that kind of stuff, you know.
In the ghetto.
And then his spirit totem was a hound dog. And it's all there. And he would have been a huge Cure fan.
I think that is probably the case.
Fuck yeah. Elvis was one of the original goths. And then Orbison took it one step further, and Elvis said Orbison was the king of rock and roll. So the king of rock and roll really was a goth, proto-goth.
I like that. I love Roy Orbison, actually.
Yeah,
and David Lynch uses that shit in his movies and shit like that. So he recognizes that shit. The thing about this story...
I'm coming back one day, come what may on Blue Bayou. And the fishing boats and the sail float on Blue Bayou. That good.
He has a beautiful voice.
Mm-hmm.
He really does have a really nice singing voice, you guys. But
especially when I'm warmed up.
Yeah. So, you know, he doesn't just sing like Danzig, like for a joke and stuff like that. He actually can really sing. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing about this story that struck me. I was like, I'm not sure if I'd be more creeped out if it was like a ghost doing that shit or if it was a person doing that shit. Like there was a person like following them, like, Maisla, I'm going to draw an arrow while they're not looking, and then I'm going to hide, and then I'm going to... So I'm listening to them and I'm right there, because that's fucking creepy too. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a ghost wouldn't...
Trust me.
I don't know.
Trust me, people. That shit was Orion.
Thomm has spoken.
Yeah,
and he's telling he solved the problem of who was that.
Yeah.
And he was just like following you around.
Hell yeah, that was
Poor
Orion. Man.
Yeah, he passed away, didn't he? He got shot in got shot in a holdup.
Yeah.
But I don't remember what year that happened. But seriously,
There was a spiritual evolution between Elvis, Orion, and the Hound Dog, and the ghost of the Hound Dog. And then the spirit of Orion. It's like it's almost like an ancient Egyptian god. You know what I'm talking about?
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I didn't know
It transcends time.
That sounds like a Joe Lansdale
Elvis
story.
existed in ancient Egypt and Greece. You didn't know that? He's like an icon, you know.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, he's an archetype.
That made me think of that song Elvis is
He's also
Everywhere
Dionysus.
by Mojo Nixon.
He's also Dionysus. That's right.
So on that note,
he's also those engineers out of Prometheus. That's also Elvis.
Wow.
They used Elvis's face to make those engineers. He was the prototype.
He's the prototype.
He was the prototype. He's prototype ultimate male.
So was Elvis...
and then the British version with Billy Idol. That was the British copy of Elvis.
So was Elvis an extraterrestrial, or is he
yeah, fucking right. He was an extraterrestrial, he was an extra testicle, he was everything.
He's full of beans today, you guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this was the fun Halloween intro to the show. And from now on, it will be some stuff that we recorded before. Like, if you didn't hear your story on there, obviously, because I just read one of them, then it will probably get read on the middle portion of the show, unless it was too long, in which case I apologize, because we had to leave it out, because we had so many. We had to like take some out because they were just too long, and this show would have been like 14 hours long, and I just didn't want to edit all of that. So please enjoy the remainder of the show. And like I said, if you want to hear a couple excerpts from a couple of my fictional stories, then just stay tuned till the end. I'll read them before the little end sign out type of thing. And that will do it for this intro. So
I was alright for a while. I was there for a while. I forgot the lyrics, so I'm gonna make them up and watch myself on the tube. I was at the touch of my hand, it leaves me crying, crying, crying. Crying. I can't do this shit anymore, man.
I'm gonna do a David Lynch reference then. Since you just sung "Crying," I'll go Silencio. Hey, you guys! It's the Halloween episode. Yay. Look, we have the guests again.
Oh, hey.
And also, holy crap! It's been such a day. We've been drinking. We've been watching horror movies. We actually did a clown double feature today, didn't we? We watched Clown, which I wrote about on my blog if you want to check that out. And also, we watched the movie Terrifier.
Yeah, that was good.
Very good. I would recommend it. It was like an old school like slasher movie. People get cut in half. It's delightful.
It was kind of cheap, but it was like well made, kind of like the old cheap, well made movies.
It was effective. Good.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. Yeah.
I feel like we should have probably watched it on a lower resolution television.
Yeah.
This is kind of like I said, it's first world problems. You have like these high definition televisions, and you watch these kind of like cheap ass horror movies, and they look really strange.
Yeah.
But but otherwise, I would recommend it. So anyway, what we're gonna do, as we said before, on our Halloween special, so many of you have sent in stories, whether true or fictional or whatever. So we're just going to like read them, react to them, just do our regular stuff.
Yeah.
And as on our 100th episode, look, we have guests. It's Shauna. And Eric.
Yeah.
And the zombie baby.
Yeah,
and also
we got a decapitated.
There's a decapitated head. Yeah. There's a leg.
Yeah.
We have all.
There's
all kind of body parts going on.
'Tis the season.
So how many stories did you actually get in from people?
Lots.
Lots of them. All right.
Lots.
How long is the show going to be today? 2 hours, 3 hours? You have any idea?
I don't plan that far ahead.
Okay.
You know how this shit goes.
All right.
I'm just gonna like record them and see how it goes.
All right. So what's the first one?
And also, well, before we do that, I have to tell you too that I was thinking about. I said, well, I'm gonna actually read one of my own stories on here, but I couldn't decide which one to do. And then I discovered I had written like part of like the opening of a novel that I've been wanting to write for like the past couple of years, but I haven't got around to it. I'll probably get around to it in a year or two. And I was reading it back today and I'm like, hey, that's pretty good. I'm probably not going to use that, but it hasn't been published anywhere. And it's like, it might be kind of neat to read on here. So at the end, I'll probably read that. So if you're kind of interested in my fiction, then stick around for that because I'm going to read that shit.
Yeah, somebody actually sent us a screenplay.
They did. And it's like, here's the thing.
It's long though.
It's 43 pages and it's unfinished.
Right.
I'll probably like give a rundown of it. I don't know if I'm gonna read it because it was all kind of build up and they haven't really got to like the horror part yet. But I have to say it was like really good. I was intrigued and I was like, oh, I wonder where they're going with this. And then I was kind of like, oh, it's not done. So you know what I mean?
It may not fit within the context
and
of the show.
Yeah, and it's kind of like hard to read because it's a screenplay. So like I said, it's hard to read like a screenplay and make it sound creepy or anything like that.
Right.
But some people, like I said, have sent anecdotes of like stuff that happened to them. Some people have sent like fictional stories, which is fine too, because I said about that. So we're just gonna kind of like I got all the stuff here in one document, and I'm just going to read it, and then we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
So the first two are true anecdotes. They are actually from one of our patrons, who is named Natalie. I'm not going to use anybody's last name, because I didn't ask any of y'all if it was okay. So I'm just going to use your first names.
Well, they did send.
Yeah,
their
but
last
you
names,
know,
though.
it's like I don't like to
Okay.
presume.
Yeah, I think Natalie makes comments on
She does,
in
yeah.
the videos. I know that.
And she's one of our patrons too.
Yeah.
Now she sent, and she also sent a photo, so I will put it in the video later on. These are just two anecdotes that she sent, and these are like true things that happened to her. The first one is called White Wolf. So let us read that right now. She says, I live north of Los Angeles in the Sierra Pelona Mountains within the Angeles National Forest. North of the Sierra Pelona Range is the infamous San Andreas Fault. So we are no strangers to earthquakes. We are also just north of the site of the St. Francis Dam, which failed in 1928 and was one of the worst civil engineering disasters in U.S. history. It caused massive flooding and the deaths of at least 400 people. At the time of this story, I lived in a cabin that had been built in 1929 and had been added onto over the years, so maybe a little on the ramshackle side. My mom and my son both lived with me, and we heated our home with a wood-burning stove. In other words, quite rural. It was extremely dark and quiet at night, and we were far from the road. There was almost no traffic and no big trucks passing. At this time, I was volunteering every weekend with a local wolf and wolf dog rescue. As with most rescues, we had our share of elderly and sick animals and unfortunately deaths. Early morning on July 21st, I woke up because my bed was shaking. The glass started rattling and the whole room was moving. Since I've lived in California all my life, out of habit, I checked the time. That way you can check the intensity of the earthquake in the morning. 4:52 a.m. It continued for long enough that I got out of bed and stood in the doorway before it stopped. When I got up in the morning, I asked my son and my mom if they felt the earthquake. Neither one had woken up. This had happened before because they were hard sleepers, so it didn't really bother me that I was the only one who felt the earthquake. As I was getting ready, I checked local news and the internet for reports of the earthquake. I checked the Caltech website. No earthquake. No reports anywhere. I felt a cold chill. This was weird. I talked to my mom about it. She suggested maybe it was an anniversary of some kind. She suggested checking the date of the failure of the St. Francis Dam, since that was quite close by. Nope, that happened in March. Then I thought about it. It felt like an earthquake. I looked up earthquakes on July 21st. The third largest earthquake in California history, the Bakersfield Earthquake, happened at 4:52 a.m. on July 21st, 1952, just north of us. It was rated a 7.5 and caused up to 4 feet of elevation change, with 12 lives lost and at least $50 million in property damage. Seemed a little too exact. Then I saw the name of the fault that caused it, the White Wolf Fault. Another cold chill. As it happened, one of the wolves with whom I had formed a close bond at the rescue had died recently, apparently poisoned by a cane toad. He was a white Arctic wolf. Given that I was unable to find any logical explanation for the earthquake I felt that night, I tend to believe that it was Cloud, who was the wolf, saying goodbye. And she actually sent me a picture of her and Cloud, who was the little wolf that she had fostered that had passed away at that very time with the earthquake. And she was the only one that felt it, and apparently nobody else did.
So she felt an earthquake on the anniversary of a great earthquake that killed a bunch of people, and it happened to be, when was it? Around the time that the wolf died?
It was the same time as the wolf died, and the fault that caused it was called the White Wolf Fault.
Okay.
And so she related it back to like that the little white wolf that she had fostered that died at that same about time.
That's a trip.
It was a ghost quake.
Yeah, it was a ghost quake from a wolf.
That's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
I mean, we have like creepy shit happen at our house all the time, so you know we're not there.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Now the next one she sent another one that was called the Star of India, which is actually a ship. She says, this is 100% true to the best of my recollection. A few years ago, I took my mom on a special birthday trip to San Diego. You're from California. You should know all about this ship.
Yep.
When my family first came to the United States, they lived in North Park, and I had rented a nice restored craftsman house as a treat. We decided to visit a couple of purportedly haunted locations in our wanderings, including the Star of India, because we wanted to see if we could sense anything. When we prepared to board the Star of India, we walked up the ramp and began descending the short staircase to the deck. At the final step, I could feel the denseness of the energy on the ship and paused before setting my foot down. I felt this before, though not with this intensity. It's like layers of activity over many years, one on top of the other. I walked around the deck, touching the railings and the fixtures, and feeling the activities that had occurred on board. I could see the ship traveling through ice fields, which surprised me since the ship was named Star of India. I knew nothing of the history. I also sensed an accident of some kind. I invited whoever it was to tell me their story. My mother refused to go below decks and stayed in the salon, seated and watching the people go by. In touring the ship, I found out that the Star of India had traveled between Alaska and California for the salmon packing industry and had traveled through ice fields. I had a deep urge to go down to the hold where it was dark and empty, but there were too many people, including the docents who were watching, to ensure people stayed in the public areas. I went back to my mother and she explained that some spirit had been sitting next to her on the settee. This was fine with her. We went back to the house, ate dinner, and went to bed. I had a vivid dream about a friend of mine who had died a few months previously. He was working side by side with me and our friends, but we were all clear that he was dead. I talked to him anyway, although everyone else was a little standoffish with him. He eventually walked over to me and his face changed. It wasn't mean, his expression just became very flat, and he grabbed my upper arms, looked into my eyes, and asked me if I was sure that I wanted to do this. I said yes. I woke up in intense pain because it felt like I had been slashed down my back on each side, from my shoulders to my waist. I sat up in bed, frightened, and knew that the sailor was telling me his story. The burning pain of having both sides of my back slashed open stayed with me for hours. When I felt able to, I checked my back in the mirror. Not a mark. To this day, I can still feel exactly where the slashes were. I've returned to the Star of India since and have communicated with the spirit again. The problem is that he does not know what happened to him. He just knows how it felt. And so do I. So that was her experience on the Star of India, the ship which is purportedly haunted. I have actually heard of that ship.
Yeah.
So she must be a psychic medium. She's seeing ghosts.
Yes. Like I said, this is Natalie. She is one of our patrons. So hi there, Natalie.
Yeah.
You were on our Halloween show. Isn't that neat? So how do you feel about that, Thomm? You are from California.
Yeah.
What have you experienced other than Mammoth Mountain?
No, just Mammoth Mountain, basically in near-death experience and OBE. I've never seen any ghosts, although I did end up in a house after I was in the Army with a friend of mine.
Oh, tell this story.
At the same time. We moved into this house. It was in Arlington, Massachusetts. You know where Arlington is, right? Down there near, I think it's right off the yellow line, or the red line stops, or not orange line. No, where the red line stops at Arlington Square. No, I don't remember what it was. It's been a long time. Anyway, there was an old house we moved into there, and it was just weird. We moved in and no one was there. They never collected any rent from us. We don't know who owned it. We were in there for about 6 months and never paid any rent.
What?
And then evidently the thing got purchased by a guy, and he gave us a couple weeks to leave.
Huh.
So it must have been being sold for some reason, but the people who owned it never asked us for any rent.
That's strange.
Anyway, that was only the beginning of
to
that
me,
story.
that sounds like the beginning of a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like you move into an apartment, it's like, wow, this is a cool apartment. Whoa, I got this for super cheap.
Be true.
And then nobody ever comes to collect rent. Nobody
the
ever
realtor
comes around.
The realtor
That's
that
weird.
hooked us up with that said we only had the bottom floor. But we quickly realized weeks into it that no one was coming to check on us. So we just had free rent of the house. You know, we had 4 floors and a basement. So I ended up living on the 3rd floor. And it had like 2 rooms up in there. And there's just weird stuff. I I found two crawl spaces that had secret doors in the backs of the closets that allowed you to go into them. I have a story about that. But what was weird about the house is that we were dating girls, and every time they'd come over, they were afraid to be by themselves in the house, and when they had to go to the bathroom, you had to walk to the bathroom with them and wait for them outside. It was a creepy house.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? They wanted you to wait outside while they were using it. They didn't want to walk around the house by themselves. The house is over 100 years old.
Oh yeah, we get a lot of
It's old Massachusetts house.
Yeah.
Victorians. Victorian. And the layout didn't make any sense, which told me that they changed some of the walls.
Right.
You know how you
to
had
make
to,
apartments.
yeah, to get to the bathroom, you had to walk through people's bedrooms and weird shit like that. That was one of the reasons why I moved up to the top floor. But what got me about that house is a feeling of being watched, kind of like Mammoth Mountain, but dreams, bad dreams. I woke up from a nightmare one time. I had a dream that there was a bunch of starving puppies in the pipes inside the house that led down into the basement.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
That's fucked up.
I had a dream that that the pipes were filled with starving puppies, and I rolled over out of bed. I was dreaming that I rolled over in bed. I didn't actually roll over in bed, but I dreamt that I rolled over in bed and looked down at the ground and saw through the floors into the pipes and that led down into the basement. And the bottom was a bunch of little puppies down in there, and they were mewling trying to get out. And then I woke up, but it was just a eerie Victorian 3-story house. That's the closest I've been to what I thought might have been a haunted house. I had seen a poltergeist experience, you know. It felt very different. Nothing ever moved. But everybody agreed that was a creepy ass house. You didn't want to be in it by yourself.
Yep.
You couldn't really put your finger on it. And you had bad dreams in the house. I'd walk in on Eric, you know, he'd be in a room doing something. I'd walk in and he'd jump sky high like I'd startled him. I said, "What's wrong, man?" "Oh, nothing, man, nothing." So you're scared of that ghost, aren't you? And he goes, "Oh, there's no ghost in here." It's like that, you know. But,
it's weird because it's like I always kind of wish that I experienced like hauntings.
Yeah.
The only time that I've ever experienced what you're talking about, and I might have mentioned this on another show before, one time, weirdly, was in a fucking Big Lots in
You
Daytona.
told me about that.
Yeah, I was just like in there. I was like buying something like mundane, like Tupperware or something. And I'm just like in there in the aisle, and I'm just like, oh, let's buy some Tupperware, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, I had this horrible, horrible feeling like, oh my, like this horrible oppressive feeling. Yeah, like, you know how people
Like
say when
falling on you.
yeah, like when they go in haunted house and they say, oh, I just felt like super like oppressed and I had to get out of there. I felt like that. And I'd never felt like that before in my whole entire life. And I was what the fuck?
House,
and I just left. I didn't buy anything.
In that house I just told you, I felt that a lot.
Yeah, I had never felt
Like,
that before.
Maybe a couple times a week at random times. But I never saw anything move, and I never saw anything. It was just a weird feeling about the place.
Yeah, I mean.
So I never really could prove it. I thought maybe it was my imagination, but other people were going through it too.
Right.
But I thought, well, maybe it was just something about the way the house looked. But I couldn't see anything wrong with the house. It was just a big old creepy Victorian house.
Like you said, there's a lot of big old creepy houses up in Massachusetts, and I grew up in one that was built in the 1800s, and never, saw a lot of. It was just this cool old house, but the first time I ever experienced something weird, my sister also did too. I was about 8, she was about 10. We were playing, I think we were nerds. We were playing Pente in front of the TV. We were playing Pente. My mom was friggin' watching Golden Girls, and something like flew in between me and my sister. It was like this shadowy thing, and we both looked up at each other. It was silent. It just went right in between us, and went behind the TV. We both looked up at each other, and she's like, "Did you see it? What was that?" And we looked at my mother. We're like, something just flew in between. You guys are freaking crazy, But we saw something.
Some shadowy object moved.
Yeah.
You didn't look behind there? Wasn't a moth or anything?
No.
Man.
No.
That's creepy, right?
But you know how some of those old Victorians were. They're
it's
weird.
Just a feel.
Yeah, you get a weird feeling in them. Well, they've been around for a long time. A lot of people lived in them, so there's no telling what happened in them over the years. And I don't know if maybe your senses pick up something that happened in the past, or if there's something actually there in the past. I haven't decided.
That's what I mean.
I
It's
haven't
like
decided.
kind of hard to say because the only other time, other than the weirdly random time in the Big Lots, which, like I said, that was the most intense feeling that I've ever, and it was just completely random. It just came out of nowhere. The only other time I've had that feeling, I was in my grandmother's house, which I lived in growing up, like a lot, and never anything creepy, nothing at all. Now, my grandfather died. He didn't die in the house. He died in a nursing home. He was cremated and his ashes were in the house. They were in like a, like a china cabinet that was in the dining room. And for some reason, like one day I was like sitting in the dining room, like working on some shit, like on at the dining room table, like I did. And then all of a sudden I felt very, very strongly that someone was standing behind me. And that's where the ashes were. They were right behind me in the china cabinet. And I had never felt that before, like, but I really, really felt like someone was back there.
Yeah.
Like so intensely that I thought like maybe it was my sister or one of my brothers or something like that. So I was like, what the fuck? And like no one was there. And that doesn't happen to me very much. I mean, everybody that watches the show, I'm like super skeptical and stuff. So that doesn't happen. And so that time and the time in Big Lots, that's the only two times that's ever happened to me. And I grew up in a house in South Daytona. It's not there anymore. It's been torn down. It was my other grandmother's, my maternal grandfather's house. And my mom and all her sisters and brothers grew up there. And they all said that they either saw ghosts or they heard footsteps on the ceiling or whatever, or they had seen things or the house was haunted. And I lived there for probably a couple years off and on. And I never saw or heard anything. It's a creepy house, but I never saw or heard anything. So, the fact that that was supposedly a haunted house and I never saw or heard anything. It was a cool house. I still put in a lot of my stories and stuff like that, but I never saw or heard anything there. But I did see and hear some stuff in like other random locations. So, that should tell you something right there. But now, since we're talking about bad dreams, let's kind of go off on a tangent. What is the worst dream you've ever had? If any of you can remember. Can you remember what the worst dream you ever had was? This is a Halloween show.
I don't remember.
Find some creepy shit.
I remember mine, but I was like 5.
What was it?
Remember.
Oh, actually. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Was it? Well, you remember
When,
one?
yeah. Well,
Okay.
when I was
Good.
little, I was. I don't know if you can just attribute it to. I was sick, kind of frequently when I was younger, and I would have these friggin' horrifying fever dreams that I was in hell and time moved like kind of backwards, and I had to like work my way backwards through time to get out of hell.
Yeah.
It was
Wow.
and I was a little kid, and these would happen like recurring when I was ill. So it was probably just like my brain frying up, like, oh yay, have some fun.
Oh my god.
Probably the worst one I had was probably about 5 or 6. In real life, I went to my granddad's house in San Diego. All right, and he had on a mantle a ship in a bottle. Remember ships in the bottle? And I pulled that little bottle down and they showed it to me. It had a little ship in there, and I was looking at that ship and I was thinking, boy, how small would you have to be inside that ship?
Oh, he's
And that really happened in real life. Later on, I was asleep and I had this dream that there was something attached to my face, and I tried to pull it off, and it turned out I had a huge spider wrapped around my face like that.
He hates
And I was
spiders, you
trying
guys.
to pull it off.
Oh, my
And as
God.
and I saw like the camera pan back of where I was, and I was inside that little ship in that bottle with a big spider wrapped around it. And
That's fucked
and I was
up.
probably about 5.
That's fucked up.
And I remember that dream to this day.
That's
and that was the scariest dream I'd ever had. Yeah, I had a spider wrapped around my face, and when the camera panned back, I was tiny inside that ship in that
Oh
bottle.
my
sitting there.
god.
And you were like 5?
5 or 6.
Oh.
Yeah, my mom had to snap me out of that. She ran in the room and woke me up. And that's like one of the few nightmares I remembered over the years.
Yeah.
That might have been my first nightmare. It's pretty bad.
You know what's funny? The one I remember from when I was a kid, if you grew up in Florida and you went to Disney World when you were a kid, which I did quite often, the Snow White ride, I haven't been on it in many years, so I don't really remember what it's really like. But I had a nightmare about it when I was little that like I was kind of I don't remember if I was so much on a ride, but it was kind of like I was walking through this kind of big room and it was like super dark and black and stuff. And then like coming up out of the floor were these like fake alligators. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's like a fake alligator in the Snow White ride, or in the, not the Snow White ride, but the fucking, the Peter Pan ride that has the alligators coming up out of the floor.
Yeah.
And so they were like these fake alligators like coming up out of the floor, and it was like freaking me out. Like I'm like walking through them like, oh my God, there's these fucking alligators, because I'm scared of alligators in real life. So they're like these fake alligators, but I was like super scared of them. But in my dream, for some reason, I saved myself by pulling this little, how can I describe this? It was like a little patch of hair. It was like about this, like as big as like a big Band-Aid. And it was like a magic carpet. And I put it down and I stood on it, and then I could fly.
Yeah.
So then I flew over the alligators, and I'm like, suck it, bitches.
Here's another one. I told Jenny this one. I guess I had a thing for pirate ships and shit when I was a little kid.
I did too, kind of.
I was probably about 7 when I had this one. I used to love to go out in my backyard and take little shovels and dig trenches into the ground, and then turn the hose on and fill everything with water. You know what I'm talking about? Make canyons and make waterfalls and make ponds and shit. You know what I mean? In my backyard, my dad would get furious because I'd tear up the fucking grass.
You're killing all my plants.
Yeah, I'd tear up the grass. So I had a garden hose. Well, I had a dream I was doing that. I was making a river, ponds, filling that shit up full of water. I'm having fun, playing with toys, and I look up. And here comes a fucking pirate ship coming down the fucking...
You made a pond and then a pirate ship came.
Ship started coming down the little fucking river that I made. It was about 4 feet long. And it was coming straight out of my head. It was just like a toy wooden pirate ship about 4 feet long coming.
I love this.
And I'm going, look at that bad motherfucker. Yeah! And it's coming like that, and there's somebody on the deck. And I look, and it's a little bit of Yosemite Sam. About that tall. And he's running around going, dag nabbit, and he's shooting at me with fucking flintlocks. Or he hit his little 6-shooters, right? So I reached down and grabbed his ass like that off the deck and bit into him like he was Godzilla. Bit into his head, and it broke open into that cherry pie filling from McDonald's. It burned my fucking mouth.
That was a dream.
That was a dream.
This is the one
you know
I thought you were talking about.
When you bite into cherry pie at McDonald's, the shit burns you? Well, I did that to Yosemite Sam. It wasn't blood, it was pie filling. And I bit him like that. Oh, it burned me. Oh, shit. And that was, I woke up, and that was the end of that dream.
He told me that. We were like out walking one day, and he told me about the dream. Like, that is the most awesome dream I've ever heard of. You picked up a tiny Yosemite Sam and bit into him, and he had cherry pie filling.
I thought of it was cherry. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, well, it wasn't.
That's amazing.
Instead of blood, it was cherry pie filling. Well, see, it made sense at the time. It made sense at the time.
All dreams make sense at the time.
Well, see, the thing is, I see the fucking pirate ship coming. It's only 4 feet long. It made me feel huge, right? So I thought I was Godzilla. So I attacked that bitch like Godzilla would attack this shit. Ah! And I grabbed Yosemite Sam, tried to bite his head off. But I didn't bite his head off. I bit into that hat. You know that pirate hat? It bit through that pirate hat, and the pirate hat had
and
pie filling.
And that had the pie filling.
Yeah, but that's what had the pie. But it was his head, too. It was all, he was hollow.
Who knew that Yosemite Sam was full of pie filling? I wouldn't have known that.
Cherry pie, caution. Caution.
Filling is hot.
Filling is hot. Yeah.
Now that you're talking about it, I just remembered another really horrible dream I had. This was the dream, and this actually wasn't that long ago, because I remember waking up and you were awake, and you was like, why are you fucking kicking me? I will tell you why I was kicking you. And I actually wrote a short story based on this too.
Because I did. Attacked.
Yeah, I do that sometimes. So I had a dream that me and him were living in, it seemed almost kind of like, it was like an apartment building, more like a college dorm. There was like other people around, and we were like in this room. And I dreamed that I woke up in the middle of the night, and that I heard someone's TV like playing like in another room. And I got up, and I'm like walking down the hall, and then I see this person, like a guy, and he's in this room, and he has a TV, and he's like yelling at the woman on the TV. She's like a newscaster or something like that. And he's like yelling to like, you can't, you fucking da-da-da. He's like that. And I'm like, okay, fuck that shit. And I was like, that's really weird and creepy. And so then I go downstairs, and it's like super dark. And I go in the kitchen, and it's really dark, and I start like making a sandwich or something like that. And then like this girl comes down from downstairs, And I'm like, there's like sirens or like some noise like coming from outside. I'm like, I wonder what's going on down there. And she's like totally being weird, like, I don't know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And she's like in the shadows and I can't really see her. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, that chick's a total bitch. So I'm just going about my business. And then all of a sudden, like I decide, oh, okay, I'm going to wash the knife that I used to like make the sandwich or whatever. So I'm at the sink and I'm like washing the knife. And then the door opens and there's like a frat house or something like that, like across the street.
Oh, that's terrifying.
Which it is. And that's another thing. Like I said, my grandfather's house in South Daytona that I grew up in was across the street from a frat house. And actually now it's been torn down and they built a frat house for Embry-Riddle University on the site of the house. Damn. So now there's 2 frat houses. So it's 2 times.
Fraternity?
So it's 2 times as terrifying. So there's a frat house and there's like a party going on over there, but it's like far away. There's like lights and noise and stuff. So I'm like looking out over there and there's lights and I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going on over there. So then I'm like just washing the knife or whatever. I'm at the sink and it's all dark. And then all of a sudden, like the door opens and then this couple comes in. It's like this guy and this girl and they're like making out, like as they're coming in the door, like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, you know what I mean? And I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to pretend I'm not here or whatever. I'm just like not a part of this. So then they're like making out and stuff. And then it starts to get like super weird. Like he kind of like pushes her down on the floor and then he grabs her ankles and then like pulls her legs apart. Like really, and I'm like, oh my. And in my dreaming mind, I thought to myself, he's going to pull her feet off, which I know is not rational, but I thought he's going to pull her feet off the way he was. And then he did. He was like that. And he was like, "Rah!" And he just like pulled her feet off.
Damn.
And then I was like, I'm just like standing there like at the sink, like washing the knife, like, fuck, what do I do? Like, I was like, I wanted to run and like I couldn't. And then like he whips around and he looks at me and I can remember what he looked like. He had like this big face, like this big forehead. He had blonde hair. It was like all swept back. He had like these ice blue eyes. Like I super remember what, like if I saw him in person, I would recognize him.
You're the dude that ripped the girl's feet off.
Yeah. And like, I'm like looking at him like, oh shit. And like, then he like starts coming at me and I'm like, oh shit. And like, I have the knife and he grabbed my wrist. And I took the knife it was just like a butter knife or something. And I was just like that because I didn't know what else to do. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. And then I started kicking at him. But because there was a bar like in between, you know, that I was just like kicking the fucking whatever, like the, you know, the material that was in between. And then at that stage, like I woke up and I was kicking him.
Yeah, kicking me. Well, what are you doing?
And then he woke up and he's like, why are you kicking me? And I'm like, because you were gonna stab me and then pull my feet off. I'm like, it's like
was
really
like, oh,
hard.
I was dreaming, and I went, yeah, you better go back to sleep.
Yeah, I was like trying to kick him, like
kick
trying
me
to like.
Me.
Yeah, it was like, and that was like that was like one of the worst dreams I ever had. And I actually turned that into a short story, which maybe I should read on this show. I'll try to find it later. It's in my fucking computer somewhere. But yeah, I turned that into a short story because that story that fucking dream scared the shit out of me. That was yeah. It's like
nowadays whenever I have a dream, I'm always about 22 when I'm dreaming. I'm never my own age. I'm always like much younger. And I'm always like either 22 or I'm in high school. No? Not with you guys?
I don't know.
I have reoccurring dreams where I'm back in high school and I damn can't figure out what class I have next. I'm looking at my school schedule going, what class do I have next?
That's a very common.
Yeah, you're going like, what fucking class
Where
is
am
next?
I supposed to be? I have those every now and then.
I used to have a lot of dreams that I failed high school because I didn't pass gym. And if anything, that's what I was kicking ass at.
Yeah.
Like,
I would
pass gym.
Yeah, couldn't get out of high school. Had to go to freaking summer school for gym. What?
Oh man.
Damn.
It is weird in dreams when the people, like you're saying, that are in your dreams that you've never seen in your life.
Yeah.
Like, who are those people? What is that?
Like, are they real people?
You can your subconscious can just dream up alternate personalities, and they'll fight you. And you're like, who is that?
That's
Sometimes
like really
you feel
weird.
Like you know this person.
Yeah, you feel like you know.
Yeah.
They're parts of you.
They have to be.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I mean, you would think.
Yeah, there's
So
some.
the part
They're
that
little
pulls
AI
feet
things
off
that you've made.
is part of you, Jenny. The dude that pulls feet off.
That's what and like that has occurred to me. That's why I wrote a story about it, because I was trying to like work through my feelings about it, because I don't usually, and people would think that because I write horror and I write all this horrible shit, I write about true crime, I write horror stories, you would think that I have a lot of nightmares, but I really don't. I have had a few that I remember, but really not that many. It's like I don't really remember a lot of my dreams. Most of them are very boring. The couple of nightmares that I've had, I've written stories about them, and then that was kind of the end of it. And actually a few nightmares that I've had, I was actually the perpetrator. I was actually the killer. I actually had a dream that I was the Ghostface killer from Scream at one point. Not too long after that movie came out. I dreamed I was like walking down the streets like near where my grandmother lived in Daytona Holly Hill area, and I dreamed that I was the Ghostface killer. I don't actually dream that I'm usually me. I usually dream that I'm other characters, and I will move to different characters as the story progresses. I guess because I'm a writer, and I guess because I watch a lot of movies. So
I'm not always me in my dreams. I'll be just whoever.
Yeah, I'll just be like, and the perspective changes. Like sometimes I'll be like, sometimes I'll be me, but sometimes I'll be this other person, and sometimes
As far as I know, I'm always me.
I've always been me.
Yeah, no, not me. I'm not usually me in my dreams. It's I don't know. It's hard to explain.
And most of the time when I get in trouble in my dreams, I got guns with me. And as I start using them, they get weaker and weaker and smaller until eventually it's a squirt gun.
It's like a candy cane or something.
Just like, goddamn, and then it runs out of water.
I've had dreams where
then you just throw it at people.
I'm trying to punch a person and you just can't punch
them hard enough.
You just can't punch hard.
Yeah.
It just ain't working.
I had one dream where I was beating a motherfucker's ass and knocked him out and jumped on top and started stomping on him, and I looked at it, there was nothing left but a greasy spot.
So you did your job. Good job.
Just a greasy spot. I don't remember any of the crushing. It's just, where'd you go?
I was beating
there was
on you.
Clothes and shoes there. You know what I
mean? You beat him out of his clothes and shoes. I have to tell you though that it's like you seemingly. I mean, you used to have much worse nightmares than you do now, because now you seem like you fall asleep and you just sleep. Back like many years ago.
Yeah.
You used to be like,
you
would talk
dogs.
in your sleep. You would like flail around like, motherfucker, blah, blah, blah. You'd be like flailing around in your sleep a lot like that. You know what I mean?
Being attacked by dogs, fighting people, all kinds of stuff.
You don't do that anymore.
I knew, and I don't do it anymore.
So I don't, I don't know if it's just like because you're older now, you've kind of got
one of the ones that, and I would never remember it. Sometimes
because I'd wake you up and be like, what the fuck, you just smacked me in the face, what the hell?
There was one of them that was kind of reoccurring, over a period of many decades, was that I thought I was underneath a pile of a bunch of dogs that were just tearing me apart, fighting hundreds of dogs.
Man.
Yeah. And then as soon as I'd wake up, I'd forget it. I'm like, oh no, I was just dreaming. Leave me go, and I go back to sleep. Yeah.
I was wondering about that
being eaten alive by about 20 of them.
Because sometimes I would wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and I'd hear you going, motherfucker, blah, blah, blah. And then you'd be like thrashing around.
This is like when I was, living with like ex-girlfriends and wives and ex-wives and stuff. They were just like, when they would wake me up, I'd be making growling noises because I was making the noises of the dogs that were eating me. It was like, I'm fighting them.
He's going feral.
Yeah.
They must have thought you were possessed.
Yeah,
probably.
They said it was scary.
Whew.
Okay, so does anybody else have dreams of their teeth falling out, or just me?
Yeah, I had that one.
Oh, I did recently.
And they hit the ground, like hit the desk, and a bunch of like a bunch of corn. They cut them off the corn cob, just boom, they hit, and the teeth go.
See,
they're all connected.
The weird thing about it's like
your teeth falling out. They fall out in a big row.
I didn't know, but I hear that's a very common dream theme.
Yep.
Like I've had a lot of them, and it usually occurs in a dream that is not even related to teeth in any way at all. Like one time I dreamed something like totally mundane, like I was in the fucking McDonald's drive-thru or some shit, and then like I'm ordering my Egg McMuffin or whatever, and then all of a sudden I feel my teeth falling, and it's always super, super realistic. Like so realistic that when I wake up, I'm like,
checking.
My teeth are gone, and then I'm like,
feel the cold air.
Yeah, it's like I feel them like going over my lips. I feel them like falling out of my mouth. So it's like when I wake up, I'm always like super weirded out because I'm like, oh my God, I don't have any teeth now.
It has something to do with feelings of powerlessness or fear
that's
of
what
being
I've heard.
powerless.
And I've heard
losing something.
Yeah. I've heard that it might be like super like a throwback because it's like losing your teeth. I mean, in nature means that you're going to starve to death. I mean, in the natural world.
Sometimes when it's happened to me, though, I've woke up and it was because I was grinding my teeth.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Because I might do that too. I think I've done that too. I think I grind my teeth in my sleep too. So that might be some of it. But yeah, that's like a recurring, and I have that happen like all the time. And another thing that happens too, and maybe you guys know something about this also. Whenever I'm sleeping and I have to pee, and my body's trying to wake me up, I always have a dream that I'm looking for a bathroom, but every bathroom I find is super disgusting. It's either super disgusting or there's like a murderer in there. There's always some reason I can't use it. Like I'm always like, it's like I'm always like, oh, I have to pee, and it's like, and then I go in this bathroom, and then it's like it looks like I said, like the bathroom from Trainspotting, or there's like a serial killer that I know is like lurking in the next stall or something. So there's always some reason I can't use it. So I feel like that's like my brain being like, hey, dummy, wake up because you have to pee. Like, don't went to bed. You know what I mean? So that's very funny.
I've
and it's
had
like,
dreams like that.
Yeah, so maybe like other.
And I had to take a crap, and
Right.
It was so disgusting I couldn't
use it.
Yeah, it's like I have that a lot because you know what I mean. Because sometimes we sleep before we go to bed, and it's like it's like I'll have to pee like at 3 or 4 in the morning, and then I'll start dreaming that I'm like, whatever I was dreaming, and then I'm like, oh, we need to find a bathroom, I say to my dream friend, and then it's like, then I go in there, and it's like this fucking horror movie bathroom, and I'm like, fuck this shit, and then I wake up.
I don't know why, but, like she's always having dreams about somebody coming for her. I never really have that. It's always animals or monsters. I've been attacked by Frankensteins, groups of Frankensteins.
Frankenstein's monsters,
zombies.
Please.
Okay, remember when we were a kid, there was an old video game called Berserk?
I remember that game.
You had to fight these robots, and one of the robots was a bouncing head with a smiley face on it, or angry face on it. I got chased by one of those. Just a bouncing ball with a face on it.
What?
Yeah, that one scared me.
That's kind of disturbing. I can see
it was bouncing like a slow motion. Boom. Bonk, like something out. It had a face on it.
I remember the most terrifying dream I had, and Jenny, I know you'll
I'm gonna turn this into a story if it's good.
I was in high school, I think, and deep water scares the shit out of me because there's so much that's undiscovered.
Yeah,
the percentage is oh my god.
And you're flying. There's mountains underneath there.
Oh my
god.
Fuck
the ocean. Fuck the ocean.
But anyway, I had a dream that I was at this weird like kind of park, and there were these huge like tanks, but they were these, for whatever reason, they were made out of cement, and they were for keeping like sharks that dwelled like just in ridiculous depths of water, but there would be like these trench type pools. And I remember I woke myself up from one. It was so terrifying because there was one fucking just deep, like Mariana's friggin' trench style deepness pit, and I knew that there was like a creature, like a shark coming up.
No.
And I woke myself up out of that shit.
No.
It's still terrifying. I was like 18.
It's like I've had dreams where I was like just in this really deep water, and then all of a sudden I see this big eye like right here. Like, but remember the old ride they had at Disney?
That's where you got that.
That's where I got that. Yeah, from what was it? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, right?
Yeah.
I used to love that ride, but it scared the shit out of me. The first time I went on it,
the submarine that didn't go underneath the water.
Yeah, it's like when you're little though, it's like a submarine. It only went like what, 2 feet? You could see the surface if you looked. It was like that high above the submarine. But when you were a little kid, like you really felt like you were underwater until like you're in a submarine, and all of a sudden there's a big fucking squid eye like comes across, and that like really traumatized me a lot when I was little. So I had a lot of nightmares about being in this big huge ocean, and then all of a sudden this big huge mass comes by, and then this big fucking eye.
And then if you
that's
go
like
to
bigger
Disneyland,
than
we went to Disneyland a few weeks back. All those rides at Disneyland look like shit.
Well, they do now.
All the paint's faded on them. Just looks like faded rubber. None of the creatures look real.
It kind of, you know what though? It kind of makes me sad though that you can't,
it's cheap now.
that people can't like approach things the way they were approach them when they were children, because it seems like, I mean, shit scares you a lot more when you were a kid.
They don't keep that.
I kind of miss that.
Like they used to.
Not like I want to be traumatized every day, because that would probably suck. But it's like, it's like I don't see a lot of movies anymore. Like, look, when I was a kid, I saw fucking, what was the movie with the rabbits? Fucking Watership Down. Yeah. And it fucking traumatized me. I saw My Bloody Valentine, which I probably shouldn't have been watching at the age I was at when it came out. But, I saw it, and it kept me up for like 2 nights. I was like, oh my God, a dude with a pickaxe is going to come out of my closet and like fucking get, you know what I mean? And it's like, I kind of miss that feeling. As traumatic as it was, you kind of want that like this shit could really happen.
You always learn from it,
Yeah, and it's, I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit. I think we talked about it a little bit on our, when we were talking about House with a Clock in Its Walls, because I was like so happy that when we saw it, because that's my favorite book when I was a kid, because I thought it was really scary. And I was like, I thought it was cool that when they made it into a movie now, finally, even though the book came out like in the early 70s, they actually made it pretty scary. I mean, for a little kid, if a little kid saw it, they'd probably think it was really scary. And I thought that was pretty cool, because when I was a kid, shit was really scary, but also it was kind of awesome. And I would go back and see it again, even though it scared the shit out of me. And I kind of feel like there's not a lot of that nowadays. You know what I mean?
So what's next on?
It's photoshopped.
That's what I mean. It's like everyone's so jaded now, and it's like that's pretty lame. That's pretty lame.
So what's next? What's next on the list?
Now the next one is actually a fiction story.
Okay.
So I'm gonna read this. This is by, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I'm just gonna say your first name, not saying the last name. Like I said, this is a story by Anda, and the story is called "The Index Finger." All right. So we're gonna read this. Then we'll probably take a little bit of a break. All right. The room was gloomy and dim. The only light came from the flashing images on the television, and it created shadows along the peeling walls. On the screen, the face of a man appeared. He's older than he likes to think he is, she thought. And she was right. It was obvious that some lady behind the cameras did her best with makeup to cover up the circles under his eyes and the dark spots on his forehead that he probably got years ago from alcohol consumption. She wondered how come they didn't add a much younger woman next to the poor fossil. She took a chip out of the bowl in her lap. Most of them were soggy because she had opened the bag yesterday, but this one gave up a satisfying crunch. The man on TV reminded her of someone, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Someone she met years ago. He had the same lightless eyes. They frightened her, and she knew she had experienced this feeling before. Someone else had looked at her like that. Another chimp. No crunch. It was years ago. 10, maybe 20. She was much younger then than she was now. She certainly didn't have gray hairs back then. She started getting those late in her 40s. But that feeling came way before her 40s. She remembered eyes like that used to follow her a lot when she was younger. She liked that. She missed that. No crunch. The man wasn't on the TV anymore. They cut to some fat lady crying about a murder that took place in her neighborhood. She thought about the fact that she was about 20 pounds heavier than she should have been. Maybe that's why men didn't look at her the way they used to. No crunch. The man was back now. She saw those dangerous eyes. The type of eyes that were able not only to scan through your clothes, men like doing that, but he could see through your skin, through your flesh and inside your soul, like he knew who you were and he despised you for being so typical. No crunch. She started thinking back on her youth when fat women on TV didn't remind her of herself. It was one of the men who liked looking at her that had those eyes. It must have been one of them. One of them gave her that look. Which one? Surely she couldn't remember every man that ever looked at her with unorthodox thoughts, but she knew she could remember the one who looked at her that way. No crunch. She was working as a waitress back then. He must have been one of her clients, right? And it was cold outside. He must have been God damn it. It must have been winter because she remembered a pain in her buttocks and she always tripped on ice in the beginning of the winter. She learned to be a lot more careful with time. No crunch. Yes, it was winter. She had to mop the floor after every hour. She remembered him vaguely. He sat at the table furthest from the door, in the same corner teenager couples like to sit so they could snog without being disturbed. He wasn't particularly good looking, but he wasn't ugly either. He had a very common face. Maybe that's why she couldn't remember him properly. No crunch. She took his order without really looking at him, and when she brought him the food, he gave her that look. She didn't remember provoking him. She used to be very polite with clients. Maybe she could have said something while being pissed off because of the bruise she had in her butt. However, seeing his eyes, she mumbled an apology, even if she hadn't done anything wrong. No crunch. Those eyes. Even now, years later, she could remember his eyes perfectly. Like the Polaroid of his eyes was burned onto the surface of her brain. Something crawled on her spine. The same eyes were looking at her now from the TV. No crunch. That was the problem. The balding man on TV was looking at her. No crunch. No, he couldn't really look at her. No crunch. He was looking into the camera. No crunch. People can't see you through the TV. That's silly. No crunch. But he could. He watched her. He saw her. And he hated her. No crunch. Why, she wondered. Why did the man on TV hate her? Why did the man in the diner hate her all those years ago? Crunch. She hadn't done anything to them. She was always nice, and she tried to be friendly to everyone. Crunch, crunch, crunch. She couldn't give attention to every man who desired it, though. There were a lot of men that wanted to be noticed, but she couldn't bother with all of them. Which woman can? And about the ones that were older or married, surely she couldn't bother with those. It would have been wrong to give attention to those men. Crunch. And what about the ones that she just didn't like? What about the men that were common and the ones that drank excessively and started losing their hair? No woman should bother with those. She felt something warm in her mouth. She looked down at the bowl. There were no more chips, but the bowl wasn't empty. She looked at her right hand and counted the fingers. There were 5, just like there's always been. One of them had a red river running from it, though, and it was shorter. Her right index finger was missing its first knuckle. Where was it? Was the only thought she could form. The metallic taste in her mouth overwhelmed her. She put up her red hand and spit. Oh, there it is. The end. I like that one.
Cool.
That was a good story. Thank you, Anda.
That was crunchy.
Yeah, I like that story very much. All right, so our listener, Jana, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but she sent us a couple of experiences that she had, very true experiences, so we're kind of going to relate those. She has actually titled them. The first one is called The Vortex of Anger, and the second one is called Screaming in the Night. So I'm going to read those right now.
Okay, let's hear Vortex of Anger.
Yeah. She says, these 2 experiences happened to us in the apartment we currently live in, taking place soon after we moved in back in 2004 and lasted for a little more than 2 years. The first experience we noticed soon after moving in during June of 2004. With it being the summer, we often had the windows in the bedroom and living room open, these windows facing out to the front of the apartment building, which is a 6-unit converted mansion in Buffalo's historic Allentown neighborhood. Our apartment is on the 3rd floor and is the top floor. We live on Arlington Place, right next to Arlington Place, which is surrounded by houses or old mansions like ours. We're 1 block from Allen Street, where there's a huge bar scene where many famous Buffalo bars can be found, like the Old Pink, Mulligan's, Brick Bar, and Nietzsche's. Many late-night revelers often cut through the park, using a diagonal path from College Street to Arlington Place on their way to North Street and more residential blocks. With the windows open those summer months, it didn't take long for Scott and I, that's her boyfriend, to notice something that seemed to happen with some regularity. Often you'd hear people fighting out on the sidewalk in front of our building, heated arguments, shouting, or sometimes outright physical struggling and fistfighting. The freaky thing that we started to notice about this was that oftentimes it involved people that were obviously friends who then turned on each other when they stepped in front of our building. You'd hear a group of people cutting through the park together after a night of drinking. They'd be laughing, having a great time, joking and carrying on. And then they'd get to the sidewalk out in front of our house, and bam, they'd start shouting or outright physically fighting. We started to joke and call the area out front of our house the Vortex of Anger because there was something swirling around out there that caused people to lose their shit. But it started to get really freaky when one hot summer week, 3 separate times, twice on consecutive nights, we heard people who appeared to be friends one moment get into huge brawls right in front of our place the next. With one particular group, I remember hearing one of the guys grabbing the other like, "Come here, you fuck," and the girl in the party shouting, "Leave him alone." Another of those 3 incidents that week, 2 guys broke out in a physical fight, and I could hear one of them shouting at the other, "Fuck you," repeatedly for some distance as he chased the other. It was at this point I turned to Scott in bed and said, "This is really beginning to freak me out." Domestic shouting matches between couples, random arguments, unexplained screams of single people, it was constant. One time, Scott said that he was sitting out on the stoop out front, drinking his coffee and reading the news on his phone, when a homeless man came along, and as soon as he stepped in front of the house, he threw down his belongings, started stomping his feet and shouting, "Motherfucker," at the top of his lungs. He wasn't shouting at Scott, just shouting in general. Scott described it as a sudden chemical or electrical change where he just sprang into this transformed feral person. Another time, when Scott's sister Nancy and her husband Ford came to visit us, they too broke out into a heated argument as soon as they stepped in front of our place. There were too many incidents to count. I would say on average, we noticed it about 2 or 3 times per week, and there were times we noticed it more than once per day. The other experience, and I don't know if it's related, but it should be noted that the head of our bed at the time was located just under our bedroom windows that face the front of the house, happened maybe a year later. Now, in retrospect, and let's be honest, as soon as the next morning, this event was pretty hilarious, but at the time it was happening to me, and unfortunately to Scott, it was terrifying. This experience happened twice the same way, months apart. I apparently had a nightmare, which I do not recall and did not recall as the event was happening. As I slept, I moved towards Scott in bed, grabbed him by the collar, and pulled his face right up to my own and started shouting repeatedly, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." What I woke to was the sight of his startled face, his eyes flying open, so I think my eyes had to be open even though I was asleep, and that's what woke me finally to the sheer state of terror. And I mean terror. I was coiled up real tight and had this impending feeling akin to there being an axe murderer in the house, and he was about to kill us in our bed. I then broke out in hysterical bawling. Scott, of course, got up, put on the lights, got me something to drink, calmed me down, etc. The second time it happened, months later, as I was waking up still shouting, I knew I had done it before exactly the same way. What's weird is that this second time, I felt a bad presence in the room with us. It could very well have been my overactive imagination, but for some reason I shut my eyes and wouldn't look around, particularly the foot of the bed towards the entrance to our bedroom. Both times afterwards, I seemed to go back to sleep with little incident and didn't really dwell on it, which in retrospect was odd. Again, it's funny as hell to think about poor Scott being startled awake by his mad wife screaming like a loon in his face. He's a very nice guy. We laugh about it a lot, and thankfully it hasn't repeated. We noticed that things quieted down after a couple of years with the vortex and realized this kind of coincided with us getting our dog, Michan. She's a half border collie, half lab mix, and a very sweet dog, not aggressive at all, but is very protective of us and often sleeps just outside our bedroom door, facing outward or lies down at the top of the stairs looking downward. The staircase to the 3rd floor starts within the door of our apartment, so the stairs are part of our unit. But it's probably normal dog behavior. This is our first dog, so we really don't know. Also, we since moved our bed against another wall, so it's no longer located just under the windows. And it should be noted, Scott, a filmmaker who directed a film on Laura Secord in the War of 1812, had a little tidbit to share with me that I can share here. He told me that along North Street, which is around the corner from us, and in the direction where most of the revelers head to, a huge battle in the War of 1812 took place. It was the Battle of December 29th and 30th of 1813, the burning of Buffalo, with hundreds of scalped soldiers littering the road, which at the time was called Guide Board Road. The retreating American soldiers were ambushed by the Native American allies of the British. Don't know if it's related, but it's there to ponder. Attached, you'll find a photo of the front of the house, which I will put in the video, and a pic of Muchan, our protector, which I will also put in the video because she did send me that. And she says, "Happy Halloween," which will also be their 23rd anniversary. So happy anniversary, you guys.
Anniversary. This reminds me of another case. There was a case that happened in the 90s. And it was one of the first times I ever saw some video evidence that was presented on TV. I think it was one, remember there was an old 90s TV series, I think it was called Sightings? Mm-hmm. I think it was Sightings is what it was on. A parapsychology department got called into this house, and they set up video cameras in there, and they captured some pretty weird video footage. I found it on YouTube. It's still out there. I don't know if I can find it again. What had happened was this, a couple moved into the house. I think they bought the house. they were only in there for a few months. They were still setting the place up. It wasn't even fully furnished. It wasn't even fully decorated yet. They were like a happily married couple. They hadn't been married that long, but for some reason they kept fighting each other. And the fights got worse and worse, and they were over nothing. One night they were in the kitchen, and they started fighting, and the fight started to escalate, and I think it was the woman looked over the man's shoulder and saw behind him a big red ball.
They did this on The Haunting or Paranormal Witness, right?
I think they did.
Yeah,
a big
I remember
red
this shit.
ball. And of course she pointed, she goes, look, and he saw it. And it kind of dissipated. And sometime later, I think it might have been a few days later, they were fighting again, and that red ball came at that guy when he saw it, and it kind of vaguely looked like a man. And I think he said that it kind of cocked back like it was going to punch him. And it did hit him, but it didn't really hit him in the way that a fist would hit you. It hit him in almost like a spiritual way, and they fled the house. Well, they went to some university and that had a parapsychology department, and they told them what had happened, and they set cameras up in the house. And they got some pretty weird footage. One of them was during the day, you could see a shadow moving along the wall like there was somebody walking down the hallway, but there wasn't anybody there. And when it got to the end of the hallway, it was like that shadow disappeared into the living room, and then the door shut. And there was nobody in there. And then they got another shot of a box. They had a camera up near the ceiling, up in a corner. It's probably up on a little tripod. A box of books fell over because they abandoned stuff there when they ran. Like a packing box of books fell over, and the books just came out. Like something scattered them. And there was it looked like a lawn chair or something, you know what I mean? And it flipped over. And it's just, there's nobody there. You can't see it. It's just like the books. Yeah, I'm going to try to find it. Maybe we'll put it in the video. And then the third thing that I remember from that is they had a camera in the kitchen. And you see the cupboards start to vibrate. And the silverware drawer pulls out, and silverware just starts flying up. And you could see that things were shaking. The camera started to shake, and then it just fuzzed out into static. Yeah, and that was all they showed. It was pretty weird. When I saw it, it reminded me of Mammoth Mountain. And I was like, that's kind of like the stuff that would happen. Now, I don't know what happened to that parapsychology group. I don't know what happened to that case. I don't remember what it was called. But the video on it looked kind of impressive. Yeah, kind of convincing. But I haven't seen it in a long time. I need to go back and look at it again. But I remember getting kind of chills seeing the video, going, yeah, it's kind of what I saw. Yeah.
I do remember them doing a reenactment of that on. It was either a Haunting or Paranormal Witness. I can't remember. Or one of those like paranormal shows that's on Destination America, something like that. Shit like that happens in our house, though.
I'll see if I can try it. Yeah, that was the stuff that happens here, though, is a lot more mild now.
It is, yeah. But like I said, we kind of mentioned this on
pulled those things
a couple
down,
shows ago. Yeah,
threw some stuff. You guys missed that one.
It turns the TV on. It actually turns this TV on all the time.
Turns that TV on all the time.
I come out here like every third morning and the fucking TV is on.
It threw the remote.
It also stole a couple of my... What?
I thought I heard something knocking on the door.
Are you trying to like...
No.
Don't
Scare
do
me.
that
Don't
shit.
scare me. Thought I heard something kind of knocking on the back of this wall.
No.
Might have been that music.
It also stole a couple of my things.
Yeah.
It stole a couple of your things.
Yeah, we're still missing the lighter.
Well, we're still missing a bunch of things. I'm missing a ring. I'm missing a like a little pajamas, like a night dress, and we're missing the grill lighter.
Yeah.
Also.
Big old lighter that long. I can't find it.
Yeah, I don't know where the hell that went.
Kind of you light the grill with.
Yeah.
It's the only lighter I have.
And I was like, we always like the first thing we jump to is like, oh well, the cat took it, but
What the cat
where
do with
would she
the lighter
take
that
it?
long?
It's like if she took it she would put it under the bed because that's where she puts everything.
Yeah.
And it's not under there.
Although cats do drag stuff, at one time we lived with a cat that dragged my rope chain into the room. She came in with it in her mouth, dragging a rope chain.
Well, I wonder what she's trying to prove.
I have seriously.
They just like
gigantic rope chain.
Yeah.
I have a necklace that's like, it's like a pendant, but then like it's not a chain, it's like a ribbon. And for some reason, she really, really wants to eat that. So like every time I like leave it out, like on the counter or something, she will pick it up in her mouth and just like, and it'll just go down her throat. And I'm just like pulling it, like gross. Like, can you not? Like this is like in your stomach, and I have to like pull it out, and then I have to like dry it out and stuff because it's like all it has like fucking kidney. It's so gross, but it's like I have to hide it from her because she will totally eat it if I leave it out. Seriously, our kitten eats everything.
So what's that second case? That
all right,
she had?
so this is from Sabine. Now, her and her husband are...
This is the same woman, right?
No, this is a
Okay,
different
I got that. Okay, all right.
You don't
Because
know.
that first one was two, right?
Yeah.
But they were kind of related. Okay.
Yeah. This is a totally different thing.
All right.
This is from Sabine. Her and her husband are big fans.
Good.
So she wanted to kind of relate this, so she wrote it out, some shit that happened. So she says, I once worked as an usher in an old cinema in the West End of London called the Prince Charles Cinema. This was back in the early 2000s. Despite the grand name, it was more like a grindhouse theater that showed second-run movies and held midnight screenings of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It was actually a former porno cinema back in the 70s, and before that was a theatrical hall that dated back to the 1800s. So this is quite an old place, and there was talk amongst the staff that it was haunted. I could totally believe this because the building definitely had an atmosphere. One of the chores for us ushers was to wrap a chain around the rear doors at the end of the night, and we all hated doing this because it involved walking down a long, narrow corridor that was inaccessible to the public. This corridor seemed to stretch on for miles, and you always felt like someone or something was watching you as you walked down it. We would run to the end of the corridor, throw the chain on as quick as we could, and then scramble back to the main auditorium. Now, full disclosure, whilst the building definitely had an atmosphere and I felt there could be some kind of presence there, I never actually witnessed anything you'd call paranormal. However, a number of my coworkers did. Here are a couple of spooky incidents I remember. The head projectionist was a very down-to-earth woman who was very mechanically minded and was the least likely person to believe in anything supernatural. But she had had a bunch of weird experiences and soon became convinced that there was some kind of entity haunting the cinema. One of her jobs would be to clean the lamps that lined the walls of the main auditorium. She would do this in the morning before the cinema opened. One morning, she was cleaning the lamps using her usual method of standing on a stepladder and wiping each lamp with a dust cloth, which she would toss to the floor when she was finished. When she got to the final lamp, she wiped it with a dust cloth, tossed it to the floor, climbed down from the stepladder, and then turned around, only to find that all of the cloths she discarded were scattered around the auditorium or draped over the seats. Ooh, that's like your shit.
Yeah, it sounds like...
As if someone had thrown them around with great force. There was no one else in the cinema at the time. Stepping up a gear, there was another projectionist who worked part-time at the cinema. He was based in Cheshire, which is 160 miles from London, obviously too far to commute from. So to save on hotel bills, he would sleep in the projection booth in a sleeping bag. Again, he was a solid, down-to-earth guy, but even he began to get creeped out when he's sleeping alone in the building. He would hear strange noises in the middle of the night. Sometimes the phone in the projection booth, which was a direct line, would ring and he would answer it only to hear silence on the other end.
Oh, that's a good one.
That always creeps me out. I'm sorry. Even in movies, that creeps me out. At first, he put this down to a prank pulled by one of the staff, but we all swore blind that we had nothing to do with it. Gradually, he started to feel more uncomfortable about sleeping there. Then one night, things came to a head when he was woken by the sound of banging coming from below in the auditorium. He switched on the lights and looked out through the window of the projection booth, but there was no one in sight. Being a pretty big, imposing guy, he wasn't afraid to confront whoever had broken into the cinema, so he went down into the auditorium and called out to whoever was hiding there to show themselves before he called the police. There was no answer. He called out again, and this time heard a loud bang coming from the middle of the stalls. He walked further down the aisle, but saw no one. Annoyed and on edge, he turned to walk back to the projection booth and then froze. Standing in the window of the room was a dark figure staring down at him. Totally freaked out, he rushed up the stairs to the booth only to find it empty. Just to note, there was only one narrow staircase that linked the booth with the auditorium, so no one could have got past him. To our collective disbelief, he continued to sleep in the projection booth even after this. Various other weird incidents continued to happen, but eventually I got another job that paid a touch more than minimum wage, so I quit my job as an usher and moved on. Occasionally, I go back to the PCC as a patron, and although the staff have changed and the building has been refurbished, I wouldn't be surprised if similar things have continued to happen to this day. So I feel like theaters are like super haunted. Like I feel like there's a lot of that stuff. I think we even saw a couple, like I said, on Paranormal Witnesses and like that.
Yeah,
about,
well,
like,
a lot of
haunted
theaters are
and
old.
Yeah, particularly in the UK, I feel like there's...
And, like, you're at a high energy level when you're at a theater. Like, you're there for a performance, something exciting.
Some people
it's
like
Yeah,
them.
probably that.
And, you know,
possibly.
people working in them sometime in the past, a long time.
Yeah, loved being there. Maybe,
Yeah, that type of stuff. You know, that was was kind of like the center of the community in a certain area. The theater. That was the main medium of entertainment. So back in those days, so I can see that phone ringing and nobody was there on the other end. That
always weirds me out.
Yeah.
Even like here's the thing. It's like it's weird because in movies, like a lot of shit that is maybe like jump scares and stuff like that doesn't really scare me. Shit that scares me is like little shit.
Low-key shit.
Yeah, like shit like, the phone's ringing, there's nobody there. Or like David Lynch shit where it's like, hey, I'm right here, but really I'm at your house also.
Yeah.
Like, you know, people being in two places, that like freaks me the fuck out. I don't know why, but it's just like little subtle shit like that freaks me out. People talking in different voices, that creeps me out also.
I had something kind of like that happen to me when I was a kid.
What happened?
I know
the story. Yeah, I know the story. I know this. This is a good
Weirdest
storytelling.
thing. Yeah, I came back. I was in the 3rd grade, and I came back from school, and I got home before my parents got home. So I was by myself for a couple hours before they showed up, and they were. On this particular day, though, actually, I had stayed home from school. That's what it was, and I was watching The Twilight Zone, and I loved The Twilight Zone when I was a kid, and I was sitting there in front of the television, watching The Twilight Zone, and I heard the telephone ring, and it rang so loud that it startled me. I jumped up to run to the phone, and as I was running to the phone, I was like, why did it stop ringing? Did I miss it? Well, I picked it up, and as I picked up the receiver, I heard 2 people talking to each other on the phone. I'm going, hello? Hello? And they're not answering me. And I'm just listening to what they're saying. And I'm thinking, that's my Aunt Ruthie. And I said, that's my Aunt Ruthie talking. And I hear her having a conversation with somebody.
I think you told me this story.
Yeah. And went, hello? Hello? And then it just kind of faded away. And I'm standing there with the damn telephone. And I don't remember any kind of dial tone or anything, so I put it down. And I was like, wow, that was weird. You know, I had butterflies in my stomach. You know how you had that butterfly feeling? It's like, what was that all about? So I sit down in front of the television to continue to watch Twilight Zone of all things, you know. But probably about 30 minutes later, a car pulled up in the driveway, and I looked, and it was a white pickup truck. No, it wasn't a white pickup truck. It was just a white little car, I think. For some reason, I thought it was a pickup truck, but that might have been my dad having a pickup truck at that time. Anyway. I look and see who gets out, and it was my Aunt Ruthie. I hadn't seen her in months, and with her was her husband. I hadn't met him. He was my uncle. They just got married. They were young. These people were in their 20s. And they said, "Where's your mom and dad?" I said, "They're at work." And I said, I'm home from school. And they said, "Okay, we're going to go up to Spires and get something to eat. Why don't you come with us? We'll watch you until they come home." And I'm like, "All right." So I get in the back of the car. That's why I'm saying it wasn't a truck. But for some reason, I was thinking it was a car, but I was in the back seat. And they're driving. Maybe it was a truck, but I think it was a car. I'm driving, and I said, I heard you on the telephone. And I was like 6, 7. And he said, you heard us on the telephone? He goes, "Yeah, I heard you guys talking on the telephone." And they're like, "Yeah, whatever." They kept talking. And then they're talking to each other, and they had the same conversation that I'd heard on the telephone.
Okay, that's creepy.
I said, "I heard you guys talk about that on the telephone." And it was just like, about tickets, plane tickets. That's what it was.
Like mundane shit.
Mundane shit about plane.
Yeah.
I said, "I heard you guys saying that on the telephone." And they were like, "Yeah, whatever." And it was just some kind of weird premonition that I had. Yeah. I don't think the telephone rang.
See, stuff like that is like creepier.
I don't think it rang. I think I foresaw their arrival and I foresaw the arrival and the conversation. But in order to receive the message somehow, I think my subconscious made me go to the telephone to get the message. Now here's the weird thing about some of these weird psychic phenomenon. I don't think it's supernatural. I think animals do it. And there's some evidence that animals do. That's why I think kids are good at it.
The animals have more of a sense.
Yeah,
evidently an animal can tell.
Kids. Yeah.
They've proven through cameras that an animal can tell when their master's coming back home when there should be no way for that animal to know. That they can't hear that car. They're not in the same car, the right car. They're not on a pattern. They just know. They go to the window.
They didn't get it.
They're like, oh, mommy's coming home.
They can go on text and go on Facebook.
Right.
They somehow can foresee it. It's something instinctive. It's not some high brain function. It's a low brain function. I think it's something that animals do. Yeah. And somehow, as we mature and develop, we learn not to do that. Yeah. Because maybe when you're a high functioning animal, it can affect your life in a way that. But I think it's instinct of some sort. Yeah. And it may have something to do with quantum entanglement.
Because here's the thing.
Because you're around people, you become entangled with them on a quantum level, and it's kind of like spooky action at a distance. It's almost kind of like radio frequencies, but you can just feel it.
Yeah. Well, there's a connection you have with people you're close
to.
In family.
Right, exactly.
Family a lot.
Exactly.
Because
I could call my mom when I was a little kid, just by wanting her, and she'd come. Yeah. Be over at my friend's house, spending the night scared, want to go home. I want to go home. She'd come and get you.
Because you had that happen, like you thought that your Aunt Ruthie called you, and even though she maybe didn't call you, it wasn't like important. No one died or anything like that.
She was just coming.
Yeah, it was just like a mundane kind of thing, and then like they were just having a mundane conversation. So that kind of makes me think that maybe psychic powers exist, but it's not anything. It doesn't have like any rhyme or reason. Like it's not anything like, oh, there's this big thing, like someone's dying and you have to like, it's just like mundane mother shit.
Well, I think when
that
it comes
just
to
kind of like
kids,
happens randomly.
When I think it comes to little kids, it's the same thing that happens with certain animals. Animals going to the door, knowing that the master's coming home soon. And they have it on camera, and they says there's no way this dog can know that this guy's coming. He's not in the right car, and he's coming home earlier, and how could that dog know? They did a study on that. It's weird. Your dog or your cat knows when you're coming home. That's weird. So there's some entanglement somewhere. And the Stuart Hameroff is probably going to say, well, it's quantum. It has something to do with consciousness. That because you know that person, you kind of know where they're coming. You know that they're coming for you.
Just like when animals can sense, like,
death,
hurricanes,
earthquakes,
and all that. They'll retreat before we even know.
Yeah, exactly. And it might be many factors, kind of like a precognition. Also, maybe like being able to pick up on vibrations happening and pressure and weird things all kind of coming in together. But I don't think it's supernatural. I think it's natural.
Oh, it's natural. Yeah.
I think it's natural.
I always like tease baby Cookie because sometimes she will come in my office and she'll jump up on my desk, and then she will do this weird thing where she like sits on the desk and then she like suddenly stares off into the distance.
How old are you in third grade?
And I'm like, are you looking? Okay. You're looking at ghosts, right? Yeah. You can tell me, it's cool, but of course she's not gonna tell me because she's a cat. She can't talk. But like, I do feel like she's probably looking at something because she does that all the time. Like sometimes she'll like she'll be running around the bedroom just doing her shit, and then like all of a sudden she'll stop, and then she'll like look up in the corner, like, what's that up there? I'm like, oh my god, there's a fucking demon up there.
Animals definitely.
It's cool. You can tell me. It's probably a moth.
Animals definitely imagine because
they do. I think she does
and play
imagine.
with it.
She
as
does.
If it's something else. Yeah. So they can definitely imagine. And I think they sometimes think and imagine, and they're looking off into distance, probably imagining into something that they want or something like that. I think that's a lot of it.
I would really love if they could do, kind of more in-depth, like look into like animals, like minds or their thought processes, because I mean, baby Cookie, the way, like I watch her, like the way she interacts and stuff like that. And I'm like wondering, is she seeing stuff that's like actually happening, or is she just like remembering stuff? Because look, one of her favorite things, there's this little lizard. No, seriously, there's this little lizard with no tail, and he lives like outside of our bathroom window, and she loves that fucking lizard. So she keeps like looking. She's like, oh, is the lizard there today? Oh, he is. And then she'll jump up on the thing and then like try to get him, even though he's outside. And so like, I'm always kind of wondering, is she just like remembering that about that lizard being there, or is she like looking at something that I can't see?
No, she knows that lizard lives over there. She's waiting for that. But
so it kind of creeps me out.
Yeah. No, she knows that.
The shit that she does. But you know, she's kiddie, you know what I mean? All right, so
what's the next one?
The next story, this is actually just like a little funny anecdote, and actually I kind of relate to this because I have some shit that's similar to this. This story was sent to us by a fella named Victor. He says, this isn't a scary story, but it's kind of creepy, kind of cool, and 100% true. When I went up to college at UTSA in San Antonio, I got paired up with my roommate who is from Austin. One night we were bored and up late, and he told me the story about this road called Southwest Parkway out in the hills around Austin. In the middle of Southwest Parkway were the words, "Long Live Wolf," spray painted in huge white letters. Supposedly it was a tribute to a kid named Wolf who was hit and killed by a car while walking on the side of the road. It became a tradition that when you drive over those words, you're supposed to lift your feet up off the floorboard. Like some places have that, like when you go over a bridge or an overpass. Like that's how I've heard, yeah. Being young and bored with nothing better to do, we decided to drive all the way to Austin in the middle of the night just so I could see for myself. We finally made it to Southwest Parkway, and as we're coming up to where the words were spray painted in the middle of the street, the radio station we were listening to went all static. I hit scan, and just as I saw the words "Long Live Wolf" illuminated by my headlights, the radio station started playing "Hungry Like the Wolf" by Duran Duran. Oh my God, my phone does that shit all the time. We lifted our feet as we drove over and both looked at each other like, holy shit, is this really happening? Maybe it was just crazy coincidence. Maybe it was something supernatural. But to this day, almost 20 years later, we still talk about that night. I have to tell you, my phone, which is a little Samsung Android, when I used to commute back and forth to work, every time the weather was shitty on my way home from work, my phone would play every single song I had that had rain in the title. I don't know how it knew. It just did. It would play Clan of Zymox, like whatever that rain song is called. It would play fucking Tones on Tail Rain. It would play, it would play every song I had on my phone that had rain in the title, just all in a row. I don't know how it knew how to do that, but it did. So that used to creep me the fuck out. Like I remember like driving home in the shitty weather and being like, really? How do you know this is bothering me? But yeah, my phone used to do that. So I kind of wonder how does my phone know what fucking songs to play?
I don't know.
It also used to play, here's another thing it used to do. It used to always play, I had a few songs that had like fuck in the title, like Nazi Punks Fuck Off, you know, whatever, Fuck You by Lily Allen. It had like some other songs that had fuck in the title, and it would play all those in a row. And it would also play all the songs that were in the German language in a row also. I'm not sure why it would do that. It might have something to do with some algorithm that it has, that it's playing like similar songs together.
Something.
But for some reason, like I'd be driving home and I'm like, why are all the fuck songs playing together? That's pretty weird.
Why don't you tell them about the fireball story?
What, my
you
fireball
were driving
story?
And you saw the damn UFO.
Okay, now this was a long time ago. This was actually probably before me and you even got together, right?
Yeah.
I think I knew you at that stage. But I was still living in Daytona. I used to work the night shift at a newspaper. Remember those? I used to work at the Daytona Beach News Journal when I lived in Daytona. And I worked from 5:30 to 2:30 a.m., 5:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. So I was always driving home in the middle of the fucking night. There was no one around. It wasn't like a big like traffic area. I kind of lived in a residential area. So I'm driving home one night. Actually, I had driven home for dinner, and then I was driving back. So it was only like maybe 11, 12 o'clock. So I'm driving back to the newspaper, and I see in the sky a big, giant fireball. And I'm not even saying, like, I'm not exaggerating. It wasn't like some little, it wasn't like some little, it was a shooting star. No, it was a big fireball.
If you had it in your hand, holding it out at an arm's distance, how big would it be?
It was like this big. It was like this big. Like
Size
as
of
big
a
as like an
tennis
orange.
Like an orange.
Yeah.
So if you were holding it out, it'd be
Like
about the
orange
size
or
of an arm.
tennis ball. Yeah.
Okay.
It was that big. It was like a fireball. The first thing I thought, well, okay. I had just read Phil Plate's book, Death from the Skies, where he was talking about, it's like, he's an astronomer, so he was like talking about all the horrible shit that could happen to you. Like, Phil was like, oh, look, it's like gamma rays and all this other kind of stuff. But from a scientific standpoint, but it was still kind of funny. So I had just read that like literally a week before. So the first thing I thought was, oh shit, this is the extinction level event. Where like, that was literally the first thing I thought, because I'm like a science nerd, and I was just kind of like, well, this is how we go, like the dinosaurs. Nice going, humans. This is the end of it. So I thought it was that. And then after that, I was sitting there going, maybe it's a plane, maybe a plane exploded. Or maybe, maybe a shuttle took off and I didn't know about it. Maybe it exploded.
Well, describe exactly what you're seeing.
It was a fireball.
Was it coming straight at you?
It seemed like, yeah. It was very big, and it was like, it was just up in the sky, like I'm just driving, and it was just like coming at this, like at me like that. And it was very low, like I said, like orange or like, tennis ball size. So, like I said, first thing I thought was asteroid, and I'm like, well, we're fucked. And I was like, well, that sucks, and I'm going back to work,
How long was it in the sky for?
Probably about 30 seconds.
30 seconds?
It was a long time, because I'm like driving and I'm like, holy shit. Did
it light up
We're
the ground?
dead. I don't remember it lighting up the ground, but it was just like really weird. And then like the
30
second,
seconds is a long time.
it is. It was a long time. The second I got back to work, I'm like, you guys. It's like, I saw this huge thing. I'm like, okay, we're not dead yet. So obviously it wasn't a big, huge fucking dinosaur killing asteroid. I'm like, so did a plane explode or something like that? Did you guys hear anything? And they're like, we didn't hear anything. So I look on the internet. I'm like, was there like some kind of plane explosion or rocket explosion or something? And it's like, I looked and there was nothing. There was nothing.
Sure it wasn't the moon? Like a moon?
Seriously, how fucking dumb do you think I am?
I don't know. I'm just trying to, well, you were driving. You were driving. Could you really focus on it?
Yeah, because it was in front of me.
It was in front of you?
It wasn't like I was like looking in my mirror.
How high off the horizon was it? Like if that's the horizon, how high up was it? Can you
about 35 degrees.
That's about like that.
Yes.
And it seemed to be coming straight at you.
It was right in front of me.
And was it just solid, or was it boiling, or we talked about
No,
this
it was
before.
like an explosion. It was like a fireball explosion.
Weird.
Enough that, like I said, I know what the goddamn moon looks like. It wasn't that. Like, I know they always say, like, the UFO, oh, it's Jupiter. It's like, I know what a fucking planet looks like. I know what the moon looks like. It wasn't like that. It looked like an explosion.
It was
the
red?
first thing I thought, like I said, was it was a huge asteroid, and oh my God, we're fucked. The second thing I thought was it was a plane that exploded. That's what it looked like. It looked like a plane or a rocket that exploded in the sky. That's what it looked like.
Did you see where it went, or what happened to it?
No.
It faded away?
Because look, I remember very clearly when the space shuttle Columbia exploded. We all saw it. We were in school and we went out to watch it. It's like I was in the cafeteria, but I saw it on TV like right after it happened. So it's like I remember what that looks like. It looked like that, but more fiery and bigger. So I thought that it was like something that I didn't think it was like a UFO or anything.
Were you looking at it when it went away?
I don't actually remember what happened because I was like freaking out. Like, because the first thing I thought was like, oh my God, that's an asteroid and we're all going to die in like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Because I just read that book, like I said. But then when I got back to work, I was kind of like, hey, did you guys hear about an asteroid that was supposed to hit the Earth? And they're like...
That was too unclear, though. You didn't really see it vanish then. You looked away, and when you looked back, it was
No,
gone,
it didn't vanish. It was just kind of like there, and then I was like driving back to work, and then I couldn't see it anymore. Like, I don't really remember, like, you know what I mean?
All right.
He doesn't buy it.
No, I think you saw something. I just don't know what it was.
How can I be any clearer?
I don't know.
It was a big explosion in the sky, and it wasn't the moon.
Sucks.
Imagine seeing a big, huge asteroid. Like, the first thing I thought, like I said, I thought it was a big, huge asteroid. Like, okay.
It was nighttime, though, right?
Yeah.
There was no chance it could have been a reflection from
No.
behind you on
No
your
way.
windshield.
No way. No, there's no way. It's like, here's the thing. Like, okay, when you used to watch the Discovery Channel when it was good, when they actually had educational programs instead of bullshit?
No.
You don't remember that?
No.
Okay,
It was always
well,
bullshit.
back in the old days when they had like documentaries about, like the Cretaceous, the event that killed all the dinosaurs, and sometimes they would have like the computer animation, like, oh, here's the planet killer that came and killed all the dinosaurs. It looked like that. It looked like that.
Sucks, man.
That's why the first thing I thought, because like I said, I just read that book. I'm like,
still
oh
would
shit,
like to
we're
know what it
hosed.
was.
I want to know what it was too.
I do too, and like that was the weird thing. Like I got back to work, I'm like, you guys, it's like the fucking asteroid, and like I looked online, no one reported it.
It could
no
have
one
been.
saw any. There was no plane explosion, nothing.
Could have been a meteor, falling star coming right.
It
at
could have
it.
been, but it was
just looked
very
and it
large.
burned out. That's probably all it was.
I'm hoping it was just that, but it was very, very large.
Probably coming straight at you.
It was
and then
large
burned
enough
out.
to like alarm me.
And it didn't look like it was moving. It was just getting bigger.
Well, I mean, I interpreted that
The
as
way
moving.
you interpreted it, right?
Sure.
Thing is a falling star isn't up there for 30 seconds. That happens in.
It might
few
have been 30
seconds.
seconds, but it was a long time.
Okay.
It was a long time.
Or at least
I
it
just
seemed
remember driving. I was from my house. I was on Derbyshire Road, and I was just passing what used to be a 7-Eleven, and then it was like now it's some
Yeah, she
no-name
told me about this a
convenience
couple
store.
years back.
Yeah, and I was like driving. I was like, "What the fuck is that?" And I was
Yeah.
like, I'm like, "Oh shit." Well,
Okay, what else do we have?
all right. So here is the next story. Is by a girl named Rhiannon.
All right.
Let's sing that Fleetwood Mac song, or don't.
Rihanna.
Obligatory.
Yeah.
So she says, so this story probably isn't as scary as some of the other ones people have submitted, but it's still a cool story and it happened to me. I'm a skeptic when it comes to anything paranormal. Same here. I've been on ghost hunts at some pretty well-known locations, but never experienced anything convincing. I just split with my ex-husband and moved into an upstairs apartment in a really old house. I have a cat named Saga. My friend Amy was over helping me unpack and organize things. We were in my bedroom. I was over by the bed and she was standing in the bedroom doorway. I was looking right at her, we were talking, and suddenly she says, "Oh hey Saga," and bends over to pet my cat who wasn't there.
What?
She looked over at me confused and said, "What the fuck? I just felt a cat rub on my legs." We both just thought it was weird and kept doing what we were doing. A couple weeks later, when I was all settled in, my friend Brian and his teenage daughter Sarah stopped over to see my place. We were sitting in my living room talking, and Sarah was on the living room floor playing with Saga. She looked up at me and asked what my other cat's name was. I told her I don't have another cat, and she said she saw a black cat sitting at the end of the hallway when they walked in.
You got ghost cats in the house.
That happens sometimes. Yeah. The apartment was laid out so that when you walked in, there was a long hallway. First thing, the hallway had doorways on both sides. One went into the living room, one into the kitchen. At the end of the hallway was the door to my bedroom. Sarah said she saw a black cat sitting right in my bedroom doorway when she walked in, the same place Amy felt a cat rub her legs. About a month later, my friend Eric and his roommate Christine stopped by. Christine didn't know me that well at the time, and while petting Saga, she casually asked me, "So you just have the 2 cats?" I told her I only have 1 cat. She said, you guessed it, that she had seen a black cat sitting in the doorway to my bedroom when they first walked in. I never saw the cat, but several people saw it while I lived in that apartment. They all described it as a large, black, long-haired cat sitting in my bedroom doorway. It was always people who didn't know the story who brought it up, too. So it wasn't just people claiming to see it after I had put the idea in their heads.
That's weird.
I had a cat named Vlad who died shortly before my ex and I split up. He fit the description of the cat everyone was seeing. I'm a skeptic through and through, but I still wonder if his ghost stayed with me and followed me to my new place. Now I live in a house and there have been no black cat sightings there yet.
Weird.
I kind of hope that I would actually rather like cats be ghosts than humans.
Well,
Like I don't think I would be all that upset. Like if I had a kitty that died and then it showed up again, but yay! But if it was a human, I'd be like, oh fuck off! What are you still doing here? You know what I mean?
I've had feelings of certain animals of mine that passed away.
Yeah.
After they were gone.
I've never
And a
noticed
certain rub on my leg, like a cat's rub on my leg.
Yeah.
I didn't have the cat anymore. I don't know if it was just because I'm used to feeling that every so often
Right.
or what.
No telling.
Like I said, I hope that.
Ghosts are always, just it's an unknown. I had a near-death experience on a motorcycle wreck. I felt like I went somewhere. Who knows what an animal can do or what happens to them, I don't know what happens to them when they die. Maybe the same thing that happens to us, but what do they do? Do they merge with some kind of cosmic consciousness? Do they evolve up into a higher, spiritual form, and then reincarnate into, like, they're going up through a progression. I think that's the way that they'd probably say it, like in India. I don't know. There's no telling. You won't know until we get there.
I feel like it's more likely for animals to do that because they probably don't. They probably they're humans or maybe their whole world. Especially if they're.
There's not a big
pets.
difference between a human and an animal.
There's really not.
It's just varying degrees. It's all the same kind of DNA, just coded out a little bit differently. I mean, if a human consciousness can somehow survive death with, like, Stuart Hameroff's concept of what they would call quantum soul theory, which is, you can look up Stuart Hameroff and he can explain it better than me. He's deep into it. He's an anesthesiologist and he's hanging out with Roger Penrose, who's physicist, and they're trying to study what consciousness is in the brain. Well, if a human consciousness can perceive reality and certain forms of reality after the brain is gone, if a human can do that, what's to say that a cat couldn't? I don't really think there isn't anything that says a cat couldn't. If a human could do it, then a cat could probably do it too. It just depends on what a cat would do once it loses its body. Yeah. Would probably go off and do weird shit and play and, like I said, evolve up kind of like in the Indian model. You know what I mean? Or maybe you just reincarnate into whatever you want to be. Like, I'm going to be an eagle next time, or I'm going to be I'm going to be a human. No, I'm going to be an elephant, or maybe I'm going to be an alien on another planet. There's no telling.
I kind of feel like maybe if the animals were super into their humans, they might maybe hang around.
I don't know. It's infinite possibilities. We won't really know until we get there.
We're looking at baby Cookie. She's right over there.
Yeah, she's looking around.
Yeah.
Oh, she's coming over here right now. Are you gonna jump up in the chair? All right.
She heard
What else you got?
All right. So this story is by someone named Chris.
So we had all these stories.
I know.
Yeah,
I told you I had a shit ton.
You got a shit ton of stories. All right, this is plenty.
This is a person named Chris, also known as Journey Planet. He says, my dad was a paranormal fan dating back to the late 1960s. He was friends with Sylvia Brown and various other Santa Clara County researchers. He was supposed to go to the famous Toys R Us investigation. Oh my God, we talked about that, haunted Toys R Us. I remember that. In the late 1970s. Yeah. There was a documentary about it. Except he had to watch me while my mom worked. The story he told me about why he got so interested in ghosts was amazing and probably the scariest image I've ever thought of. My dad was something like 7 or 8 years old and visiting his grandmother in Watsonville, California. She lived in an old, late Victorian-era house that was facing a large field of artichokes. The house had a huge front porch that the boys often played under. Grandma used to tell stories about and forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, the Mutsun Ohlone, our tribe that had lived on the land centuries before colonization. It was late, and Dad had crawled out of the bed and went outside to play with the dogs and was standing on the porch when he could smell smoke, like it was a huge burning fire just down the way. Dad walked down to the bottom of the steps, and he could see a lot of men on horses in the distance carrying torches. He said there were about 20 or 30 of them. He was looking at them for a while and then looked off to the side and saw about 50 people standing. All looked like his grandma, mixed heritage Ohlone, wearing old Mexican clothes like they were from the late 19th century. Dad wasn't scared to suddenly see them at all. In fact, he felt extremely calmed, that when he looked back at the men on horses, he felt deep terror, as if they had already stripped everything from him and were coming back for his soul. Dad was frozen in place, but he called over to the Ohlone saying, "Who are they?" No one responded, and when he finally looked closely at their faces, he noticed that the eyes were blank. Not black, but not white either. At that moment, he saw the men on horses start trotting towards the house, and he was so scared he jumped off the bottom step to dive under the porch, but the moment his feet touched the ground, he felt a flush of searing fire pass over him, and then he actually dove under the porch, and he saw a massive wall of fire sweep across the artichoke field. Everywhere he looked was burning, and it wasn't just the field, but several small, low structures that hadn't been there before. He heard screams and could see men and women running, some of them on fire, and then the men on horseback came and chased them. Dad buried his head under his arms and balled himself up, and after a moment the heat was gone, and it was cold and freezing, which was weird for summer in California. He pulled his arms off his head and looked out.
The entire field was burned, but there was no smoke, and no one was moving. He saw a few bodies of people, and as he stepped out from under the porch, he could hear a wailing cry, a woman's screaming cry. It was terrifying, so he ran into the house and spent the entire rest of the night looking out the window across the field, which was back to what it had been from before everything he had seen the night before, except for crows. Hundreds and hundreds of crows that had settled on the field. Dad told me the story a couple of times, with the last time he finished with, I told Grandma the next morning, and she said, I don't even have to set foot on the soil anymore to see the fire, Johnny. I can see it from up here every night. So he saw like a fire that happened in the past.
Yeah.
And he kept seeing it. Like
Yeah, I tend to think
like
stories like this are not really stories of a bunch of ghosts coming back, you know what I mean, haunting an area. I think it's too unlikely. What I think that is someone seeing something that happened in the past. You know what I'm talking about? Or maybe one ghost sends you a message, and that message is a vision of something that happened in the past.
There's just something that happens with an intense energy
Yeah.
that happens, you know, with a certain situation that happens.
Yeah.
That seems to lock within time or something. I don't know what it is.
Where did this happen again?
California.
Okay.
You're from there.
Yeah, it's just funny. I was thinking about the Indians. A lot of you guys don't know this. I'm gonna tell you something though. When I was in the 1st and the 506 up in Korea, for a little while, my squad leader was a guy named Sergeant Zamora. I forgot what his first name was. I think he's in my yearbook. I can look at it. But his father was Lonnie Zamora, the guy who reported the UFO out there. Remember the policeman that saw the UFO out in the New Mexico desert? That was my squad leader's dad. And I had first heard about that when I was in the Army. I'd never heard of Lonnie Zamora, the cop that saw some kind of a spacecraft land and guys get out and then it left. And the FBI and I think it was the FBI came and questioned him about it. Said he saw a symbol on it. I heard Sergeant Zamora and another one of the NCOs. They were sitting up on their cots. We were on the DMZ at Guard Post Collier. And they were talking about it. He said, your dad is the one that saw that UFO. And they were talking about it, and I was overhearing them. And I didn't realize that he was that was a famous UFO case. That was the first time I had heard about it. But what was funny is that he was under the impression that his dad didn't think it was an alien craft, that he thought it was an experimental craft. And when we saw that movie the other day, remember First Man? Mm-hmm. Remember how Armstrong's flying around that trainer for the lunar lander and he's flying it around?
Yeah.
That's similar kind of to what Lonnie Zamora saw. So it was egg-shaped. But that was just a little bonus material for you people, the guys who like UFOs. All right.
We'll do Rendlesham Forest one of these days. I know, like a lot of people.
Lonnie Zamora's son was my squad leader.
Ooh, so I was like, yeah, we could do a whole show about that shit.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think you've told the story in the show before about your the plane that you saw that didn't look anything.
Yeah, that was another weird one.
We bring that up a lot when we're talking about how people's memories are fucked up.
Well, I got two plane stories. The plane that I saw that I couldn't figure out what it was, and then the time I was on the DMZ and I saw a plane fly across the DMZ and I reported it. And they were, and I don't know if I fell asleep and hallucinated that or if I actually saw that. No planes should have been crossing the DMZ. And I said, I just saw a plane cross the DMZ. And they were, no, you didn't.
Like,
and I said, yeah, I did. It had lights on it. I watched it cross the DMZ. And they said, well, which way was it going, how fast and everything. And they logged it. But they said, did anybody else see it? And they said, I was in that bunker with another guy, but he was asleep. And I said, no, I didn't wake him up. I saw it though. And I don't know if I was it was awful cold that night, you know. So maybe I hallucinated it. I don't know. I believe I saw it.
Like I said, people's brains are not. It's kind of scary to think about, but like your brain is not as reliable as you like to think. This is I think that scares me more than anything else. That I'm just gonna like start seeing shit that isn't there. I'm gonna start thinking shit that doesn't happen. It's like, you know what I mean? It's creepy. Yeah. That's why I think so many people are disturbed by like getting like dementia and stuff like that, because
Yeah.
it's like, that's got to be really scary, man. All right.
Yeah.
Hey, just like I said at the beginning of the show, at the end I wanted to do a little bonus segment with me just reading a couple of, little fragments of some stories that I wrote. So we'll get on with that. The first one is actually from my compilation called Hopeful Monsters, which is available on Amazon in print and ebook format. Eventually, it will also be available in audiobook format. It's actually been out for a while. It came out in 2009. I'm going to re-release it probably next year, sometime with like a new cover and things like that, and with an audiobook also. But it is available in print and ebook format, so I'm just going to read a little bit of a story from there. And then, as I mentioned on the earlier segment that had Shauna and Eric on it, I actually found part of a novel that I've been working on that, I've kind of been playing with for the last couple years. And I, just wanted to read like a little bit of, I don't know if I'm actually going to use this particular fragment or not, but it was something that I kind of liked and I had forgotten about writing. So I'm going to put that on here as well. So without further delay, I'm going to read you just the first couple little sections of my story, which is called Rara Avis. The sky was just starting to darken as Pamela Runyon left the store, a bag in each hand. She had parked as close as the crowded lot had allowed. Since the accident, which her mind always insisted on enclosing in quotes, she hadn't felt much like walking far. The lights around the parking lot were beginning to flicker to life as she stowed her bags in the trunk. She dropped her keys, swore, and stooped to pick them up. She heard a car pull into the space next to hers, but she didn't pay much attention. An owl hooted somewhere in the trees nearby. Pamela straightened up, keys in hand, but then she was grabbed from behind. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it, and she just had time to think what long fingers the hand had before she felt a sharp blow to the back of her head. After that, nothing. It was dark, but she could see a little from a faint green glow to her left, an alien light. She moved her head and groaned at the pain. There was a rush of noise in her ears, a feeling of movement. There were figures very close, hulking in the shadows just at the edges of her vision. At least 2 figures, maybe more. Pamela had the impression of large yellow eyes, of something like fur, of strange protrusions above the heads that could have been horns. Confused and unsettled by this disjointed but vivid nightmare, she rolled over and pulled her sweater around herself, wondering where her husband was. Had he got up to go to the bathroom? Thinking he would be back soon, she closed her eyes again and was soon unconscious. When Pamela came fully awake, some unknown span of time later, the first thing she was aware of was darkness and the close, pungent smell of hay. After a few moments, she also began to focus on sounds. There were furtive, small rustlings in the corners, which might have been bugs or mice, and there were louder, more deliberate sounds, which were definitely made by something much larger. These other noises seemed to be coming from somewhere below her. Her head throbbing, Pamela tried to move, but found that her wrists and ankles were bound with something that felt like thick rope. She tugged at her bonds, but they had been expertly knotted and held tight. Trying to keep quiet, in case someone was nearby, she struggled hard for a few minutes, thrashing her arms and legs, trying to loosen the ropes. It was hopeless. Panting, she settled back against the misshapen mattress she was lying on. She then realized that she was naked, but covered with a scratchy, thin blanket that smelled musky like a horse. Her heart was beating hard in her chest, but otherwise she felt oddly calm, detached. She twisted her head, wincing at the pain, which seemed less acute than before, but still raw. Above her, she could just make out the faint outline of what might have been a high curtained window, with moonlight filtering unevenly around the edges. She wondered, almost idly, if anyone outside would hear her if she screamed. Before she could find out, Pamela heard a heavy rhythmic creaking, like the sound of footsteps on a wooden staircase. As the creaking grew louder, she also thought she could hear a regular but muffled rasp of breath, in and out like the wheeze of an asthmatic. Once she had realized the implications of these sounds, her strange calm suddenly ramped up into pulse-pounding terror and panic, and she began to struggle again, violently this time, her limbs contorting in inhuman spasms in her desperate attempts to get free. She grunted and swore and screamed, thrashing against the lumpy mattress. The blanket was thrown off her body, and she felt the nip of a cool night breeze on her skin, which pushed her to struggle harder. "Let me go," she said into the darkness, which was now laden with an obvious presence. She wanted her words to sound fierce and fearless and authoritative. Instead, they came out as a pitiful squeak. She could see the figure now, dimly, as it seemed to emerge slowly from the floor. Her frenzied mind took a few long seconds to determine that it was actually climbing up into the room from below, either from a staircase or a ladder. Another few seconds elapsed before she put all the clues together and deduced that she was being held captive in the loft of a barn. The sparse moonlight from above illuminated only a vague silhouette, but as the figure drew close, Pamela could plainly see that this was not a normal person, if indeed it was a person at all. Its dimensions were roughly human-like, and it appeared to walk on 2 legs and to have a roundish head, but there the similarities stopped. There was a flash of large golden eyes, and horns or antennae protruding from the crown of the creature. Its shoulders were fairly narrow, like a person's, but they flared oddly out and down, giving it the appearance of armlessness. Pamela tried to curl her trussed and vulnerable body as far away from the approaching thing as the ropes would allow. "Please," she said, not knowing where to look on the creature and finally focusing on the yellow glints that might have been its eyes. "Please don't hurt me. I won't..." Won't what? She realized she'd been trying to think of something, some bargain she could make in exchange for her freedom. But what could she give this creature? What did it want from her? "I won't tell anyone about you," she said, which seemed meaningless, but it was all she could think of. The creature didn't answer. It was very close to the edge of the mattress now, and as Pamela watched in horror, it leaned down toward her. She wanted to turn her face away, not see what this thing looked like, and she whimpered and cried, but in the end she kept looking, couldn't tear her eyes away from it. Its face was oddly flat, and covered with something soft. Upon closer inspection, this covering proved to be feathers, which were mostly white but turned to a darker brown around the edges. There were indeed huge round discs for eyes, glowing yellow in the dimness, the pupils fixed and black and staring. A tiny pearly beak jutted from where the nose would be on a human being. Pamela wanted to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The creature was looking at her, but its eyes did not move, its expression did not change. In a swift motion, it reached down and picked up the blanket from the floor and placed it back over her, with what she could see now were perfectly normal human arms, which had previously been concealed under a long poncho. "I'm sorry about this," the creature whispered. It was a woman's voice, Pamela realized with a start, although she couldn't determine from where the voice had issued, since the creature's face had not moved. "Why have you brought me here?" Pamela asked, her heart finally resuming a normal beat. She felt much better now that she was covered up again, and now that she knew this thing could talk, could feel sympathy. The bird woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat down on the floor, crossing her legs, her face now on a level with Pamela's. "I brought you something to eat," she said. "I'm sorry about the ropes, but I can't undo them." Pamela tried to force herself into a sitting position, but only succeeded in straining her limbs painfully. She gave up. "What do you want from me? I don't have anything to give you." She suddenly remembered waking up earlier, in the van or whatever it had been. There had been others, at least 2 more besides this one. "There are more of you, aren't there?" "Yes, down below." The creature produced a bowl from somewhere under the poncho and stirred at its contents with a wooden spoon. "You have to eat now. Keep up your strength." Strength for what? In the dimness, Pamela could see the spoon coming toward her, laden with some kind of colorless mush. She was hungry, but she had to admit it didn't look very appetizing. "What is it?" "Just a stew. Eat it." The creature pushed the spoon at Pamela's mouth, and Pamela grudgingly took a bite. The stuff was gritty and fibrous and tasted slightly of maple. Not good, but not as horrible as she was expecting. After a few more bites, she looked up into the creature's stony face. "You're not planning to kill me, are you?" It seemed a silly question. Why would they be feeding her and trying to keep her warm if they were intending to kill her? But then, why else would they want to kidnap her? The bird woman looked down into the bowl, stirring at the mush absently. "No." Her voice was still muffled, as though she was speaking through a mouthful of sand. She looked up at Pamela again. "Finish your food." Pamela opened her mouth to receive the spoon, and neither of them spoke again. When the bowl of mush was empty, the creature got to its feet, and with a last glance down at the prisoner, turned and made its way back down the ladder. Pamela lay back against the mattress, shivering despite the blanket. She had wanted to think that this was all some hideously realistic dream, but the cold on her skin and the thick, vaguely unpleasant taste of maple on her tongue were too potent to be a figment of her sleeping mind. Okay, so that was that. As I said, that story is called Rara Avis, and it's in my book, hopeful monsters, and after I take this short little editing break, I will read you a little bit of a sort of a novel I've been working on for the last couple years, which, like I said, I'll probably won't get around to writing it for another several years, but I just thought I'd read you guys a few paragraphs from it and see what you guys thought. So I will be back in just a second. Okay, and here is the second unpublished fragment of a novel that I've been working on for the past couple years, so, you know, let me know what you guys think in the comments. You know you're not going to talk me out of this. Bridget lifted her coffee mug to her lips and drank. Her eyes above the rim were smiling but wary. Cade smirked at his wife across the breakfast table. I'm not trying to. I just want you to have all the relevant information before you make the final decision. And is it relevant, this information? Cade shrugged. You know how it goes. Could be important, could be nothing. Bridget tapped her fingers on the tabletop. She was a study in contrasts, her sharp, small face set against an untamed thicket of dark hair that nearly engulfed it, her expression at once sternly annoyed and softly receptive. So tell me, she said. Well, it was a dream, he said, and before her expected eye roll had even reached its apex, he qualified, I know how you feel about that, but this one seemed significant, symbolic. Like I said, I don't know what it means, if it even means anything. She considered him silently for a long moment, then shook her head with a laugh. I don't mean to be an asshole. I do trust your judgment, she said. You're in this too. She reached across the table and took his hand. So what was this dream? Cade was standing in the dimmed hallway of a hospital ward, listening to the sound of his own heartbeat. On either side stretched walls of plexiglass, seemingly endless, meeting at some point far off on the horizon. He began walking, and his footfalls made no sound on the dull white tiles. A metal-framed door drew his attention to the left, and compulsion dictated that he open the door and walk through. Inside, on the other side of the plexiglass wall, were arrayed rows of identical gray cradles. Cade peered into the nearest of these, and saw a tiny infant, wizened and unmoving, but staring up at him with pale eyes that held an unsettling intelligence. As he moved along the rows, he saw that each cradle contained a similar child. None of the babies squirmed or cried, though all were clearly alive and watching him. A faint burning aroma plucked at his nostrils. Suddenly, Cade noticed a man standing over one of the cradles, gazing down at the child within. The man was small, standing no more than 4 feet. His limbs were bluish-white, and bone could be seen prominently beneath the papery flesh. The expression on his face was one of despair, but there was also a kindness there, a tenderness toward the object of his attention. Another mistake, the man whispered, and raised his head to meet Cade's scrutiny. A crushing sadness overtook Cade then, and the burning smell grew more pronounced. As Cade watched, the man reached into the breast pocket of his work shirt and produced a rose fashioned of red glass, about the size of a $50. It was exquisitely formed, its overlapping petals tinged on their edges with sprinkles of ground glass that glinted like miniature diamonds. Gingerly, the man placed the rose on the baby's sunken stomach. The moment the man removed his hand, the infant shattered like a ceramic teacup, cracks radiating forth from the rose's deep scarlet center. Cade recoiled in horror, but the man did not seem to react. His expression bore the same resigned sorrow as before. He stepped back then into the shadows and faded away like a phantom. Cade approached the cradle, not wanting to look down at the broken pieces of the infant in the cradle, but unable to stop himself. The shards began to pulse and vibrate on the gray counterpane, and then tendrils began to sprout forth, curling up toward the ceiling and thickening into ropey vines. The vines knotted together and shot up, and started to branch outward, and before Cade could blink, he was standing in a forest clearing, with late afternoon sunlight slanting down upon the layer of dead leaves beneath his feet. The tree that had grown from the child's cradle was now a thick, strong oak, and Cade approached it uncertainly, his hand reaching out of his own accord to stroke the rough bark. As he did this, he became aware of a strange sound, a sort of click-click, click-click, coming from somewhere above him. He peered up into the branches, but saw nothing. All of a sudden, his fingers encountered a gash in the tree's trunk, as of something carved there, and he pulled his hand back to look. He was sure there had been no break in the tree's surface before, but now he saw that a single word had been cut into the bark. in letters 2 inches high. The word he read there was imperfecta. Puzzled, he stepped back, and then came that click, 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 click again, and again he glanced upward to find the source of the noise. But now there was a man sitting on one of the higher branches, his teeth very white as he smiled unreadably down from his perch. The man was stocky and very tan, with curly black hair and a thick beard, obviously a working man, with broad shoulders and heavily muscled forearms. In one hand he held a long silver knife, and in the other a pair of worn tongs. It was these 2 implements that he was clicking together, making a strange 1-2 rhythm that mimicked Cade's rapid heartbeat. "What does it mean?" Cade heard himself asking, placing his fingertips against the word carved in the trunk. "We should bury them," said the man in the tree, and his smile grew wider, Cheshire cat-like. He raised one eyebrow, as though some secret knowledge had passed between Cade and himself, but Cade remained as confused as ever. "I don't understand," Cade pleaded, but the man just looked at him, smiling, clashing the knife and the tongs together. Click, 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 click. Awaken. Okay, so that was an exclusive, unpublished bit of a novel that I've been working on. As I said, I don't know if I'm going to use that, but I kind of came across it the other day, and I'm like, I think I'll put that on the Halloween show, just kind of like a little bonus thing. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And I guess since I'm at the end of the show, I'll just do my little spiel at the end. Hope you guys enjoyed this super long, super complicated Halloween episode. We had a lot of fun doing it. So remember, if you like the show, to like, share, subscribe on all your social media, share with all your friends and family. If you'd like to financially support the show, of course, you can go to our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, which is 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a link in the sidebar to a PayPal account. We have 3 shows a week going now. Obviously, the regular episodes come out every Tuesday. We also have our movie retrospectives, which are usually old movies. That comes out on Friday. And we also have our newest show called Matinee, which comes out on Sundays. That's us reviewing the 3 new movies that we've seen in the theater the previous week. So check those out if you haven't already. Also check out our Zazzle store at zazzle.com/13o'clockpodcast. We have like a bunch of shirts and a tote bag that you may purchase if you wish to. And that will do it for our super spectacular Halloween special. We will see you guys next time. Bye.